This is the long-awaited holiday deep dive series that everyone has been looking for on Little Light when we were there. Unfortunately, I was not able to give those while there, so this is what was to come. So let's get into it together. Holiday Deep Dive Part 1. What you want to do first, and I want you to know this, is you want to probably go and recap all of the Baal worship stuff we talked about in Who is the Rain Man. That episode covered all of that. What we're going to be covering today is a little bit different, but that has some of the foundational stepping stones that you need to know to cover the holidays. We also want to look for our intro to the origins of the pagan sun wheel. That information is covered in the upcoming episode called The Pagan Origins of Our Culture. That is going to be very interesting. I hope you guys will all tune in so that you can learn the foundational information and have the knowledge to identify these things in our culture, because it's a problem. It's everywhere in our culture and we have to have eyes to see. So after that spiel, like I said, let's go ahead and take a look at what we're dealing with. We have the sun wheel. I'll just do a little tiny overview. The sun wheel has all of this stuff on it. Then it turned into worship of the gods. So here's all the gods of Babylon, just for others who did not get that and have not seen Who is the Rain Man on Baal worship. Please go back and watch that still, but here is the list of all of the gods' names that I am quite aware of and ran into. I'm sure there's more. I've learned little bit by little bit that there is more out there. So, unearthing the hidden truths, the seasons and the pagan wheel. This is important to understand because the definition of seasons is each of the 4 divisions of the year: spring, summer, autumn, and winter, marked by particular weather patterns and daylight hours, resulting from the Earth's changing position with regard to the sun. In paganism, this was identified by the keeping of an engraved image of a wheel. So there's where the sun wheel is coming from. It's according to the position of the sun and the dying back of vegetation and cold coming on, versus the warmth and vegetation coming back to life and in full vigor. This was also thought to affect human reproduction. So there's their fertility of the earth, fertility of offspring as well, coming into play. However, in the Bible, it also talks about this. It specifically mentions this kind of keeping of the seasons. It says, "There shall not be found among you anyone that marketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times." Observer of times is exactly what we're looking for, because when you're keeping the feasts, I guess, and seasons and holidays, you are truly an observer of times. And to finish that sentence off, or an enchanter or a witch. That is found in Deuteronomy 18, verse 10. So in Wicca, I thought it was very interesting indeed, because they say, a faith with pagan roots that evolves around celebration of natural cycles and seasons. That is what Wicca is. Does that shock anyone else and surprise them to death? I didn't know that. It was really interesting to find out. And of course, God has something to say about this as well. So it says in Genesis 1, verse 14, "And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." All right, so I want to make a differentiation here. This is what God meant the seasons and the changing of night and day and the sun and the moon to do. This is a function of us being allowed to have different seasons throughout the year. However, He did not ever appoint us to worship those seasons and times. He never, ever mentioned to do that. He never said to do so. We are not to be doing that. And just to prove that, there's the other verse, Psalm 104, verse 19, which says, he appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knoweth his going down. So they're programmed by God. They know they're going up and they're going down daily by his command. And so yeah, we need to just realize that this is the way most of the world and the Wiccans and everyone is following the seasons, really. And as a Christian, like we saw in those verses, it is not something that if we truly want to follow God's will, he never gave us any holiday to celebrate. He gave us the Sabbath, and that was one of the only true commandments and days which we're to keep holy. So here's how it really works on this picture. The slide has all of the different moons, a half moon, a little sliver. It gives us the scientific names. I guess I'll read it. We'll start on the top left, waxing crescent, first quarter, waxing gibbous, full moon, and then it goes back the other way, waxing gibbous, or waning, I'm sorry, that's waning. Waning gibbous, third quarter, waning crescent, and new moon. So based off of that, it's also, that's what the moon is doing. Now we're going to look at what the sun is also going to do. That's where this Wiccan sun wheel, they call it a season wheel as well, is going to show us both. It's based off of what they call here an equinox and a solstice. So you have the sun positions, which are the stakes, the blue stakes, and the black line on there is where the sun will be changing and the seasons with it. And so they have holidays which will fall on those places, but they also, as you can probably imagine, with all of mythology, and I guess as paganism multiplies, there's more gods, there's more traditions, there's more holidays and feasts and rites, to be honest, that are carried out. Once you get there and you understand how this works, there's more and more and more holidays and things added to this calendar all the time. Not really that they change today, but they were. When it was created up through Babylonian times all the way to where we are now, it accumulated all the gods of all the centuries and the ancients and everything. So it is jam-packed. And we're going to look at those things too. We're going to look at some very unknown holidays also, because you get a full understanding of why these holidays exist. And they all kind of come full circle so that you can see where it's leading, where it begins, how it all feeds off of each other. So let's take a look at what we have. This is what we just saw. That circle, that pagan sun wheel, became what I created, a timeline here for each month of things that I was comparing. I wanted to see overlaps. I wanted to see all kinds of different pagan holidays that were in the month. So I compared the Church of Satan, which you can see in the legend is going to be blue, the occult holidays, the holidays of the diocese, so the Vatican Church and the Roman Catholic dictates, and you have Wiccan in brown society. So that's kind of, when you get into it, it's a large chunk of the people who are keeping these holidays. And I know there's more. There's very specific ones like probably Coptics or Cometics, which are exactly those of the Egyptian faith that are keeping it all the way from the biblical times. They are keeping those gods and celebration and worship of those gods and everything. Or, I guess if you really want to say it that way, you could always go talk to a very interesting sect of Satanism, which I don't know. I don't have an example. But there are those who are claim to be Nazis, and they keep these things too. So let's begin where we need to. I know we're not there with our year right now, but we're going to begin with where we always do in American tradition, and that is with January 1st. I want to explain before we do that just one thing which is very interesting. As I was looking at these holidays and days in which the Vatican and diocese describes our days that we should be keeping for one holy reason or another, they have what is called days of feasts, memorials, solemnities, and obligation days. So let's go through this. I found this definition. It's a little bit confusing, but the rest of it, once you get through it, you start understanding what I'm getting at here. So it says, the holy days of Catholicism. These are ones that, unlike feast days of the rank of feast, like the Feast of the Lord, they'll give you the Feast of the Lord, the Feast of the Apostles, all these things, or those of the rank of memorials, so memorializing, Ignatius Loyola and so on, from the Society of Jesus, they will do that. There's solemnities, which replace the celebration of Sundays outside of Advent. So did you catch that? I don't know if you did, but there are Sundays outside of Easter and Lent and Advent, which to them, they're saying those are very important to them. Like, those are really high holidays, if you will, very special holidays to them. But outside of that, even, which they're calling ordinary time, which just fall on every single week, are called the Sundays outside of these things. Those, they say, is a word that comes from post-classical Latin solemnitas, meaning a solemnity, festival, or celebration of a day. I hope that this is making some sense. Celebration of a day. Now, why would they all of a sudden pinpoint a specific day, specifically Sunday, as they've told us, that they say down below in that print, the white box, every Sunday is a holy day to them, in which it's the Lord's Day, recognized as a holy day of obligation, and Catholics are bound to celebrate in Mass on Sunday. So maybe I'm not saying it very well, but they are obligated, meaning pretty much it is required of you to participate and go be a part of Mass and these holy rites and rituals every Sunday. Not just on Easter and Advent, but although it is very strange that most people go, yes, I keep going to church. I don't usually go to church, but I go to church on Easter and Christmas and all these things, and Lent, maybe. And where did that idea come from? They're kind of leading us to understand that it was actually highlighted by the Catholics and the diocese to be very sacred days, especially Easter and Christmas and all that. But beyond that, their understanding of how holy a Sunday is that every Sunday, no matter what, is downright sacred and required for a Catholic to keep. Isn't that interesting? No matter what faith or background you come from, that should be some very, a tidbit that should pique your interest. So, back to New Year's Day. New Year's Day is very interesting. It says the earliest recorded New Year's Day celebration happened first 4,000 years ago in Babylon. It took place during the first new moon following the vernal equinox. Now, I'm not going to tell you what vernal equinoxes are and everything. I'm not really a genius or an expert on any of that. So I'll just take their word for that. But it says, yes, the new year actually begins in spring. So that should tell us, when you go back and look at that kind of pale colored wheel that had a very simple drawing of the pagan sun wheel and the holidays on it, that there's a vernal equinox that is labeled on there. You can go back and look for reference. So let me just emphasize that again. The new year actually begins in spring and not winter. This was so because there was an equal amount of sunlight and darkness, heralding the start of a new year and representing the rebirth of the natural world. Okay, so it's kind of like balancing chaos, if you will. You might think of the yin and yang. Interesting. So this started with a J.B.T. And a J.B.T. Was a celebration festival of the Babylonians to celebrate the new year. It derives from the Sumerian word for barley. Okay. The festival lasted 11 days, and a different ritual was conducted on each day. All right. So this might sound interesting to you. I mean, my brain is kind of going off with alarms because I don't know if you know this, but there are many days of every holiday that has different rituals, different rites that are carried out on each day of a holiday, especially if you do it the right pagan way and do it to a T. So this is sounding very overlapping with a lot of what I've learned. Statues of the gods were paraded in this festival throughout the streets as rites were conducted to symbolize their victory over the forces of chaos. So there you go. I had mentioned chaos and the balance within of chaos and order, which is the Freemason thing. And so they're directly correlating to that. They said they believed that through these rites, the world was cleansed and recreated by the gods in preparation for the new year and the return of spring. The principal god celebrated during this festival was Marduk. Please tell me, it's okay if you're new here, but if you've been watching my stuff so far on pagan gods and stuff, please tell me that you know who Marduk is. If you do, please put a 1 in the comments, okay? That would help me know that I am having people retain the information that you guys are watching. So Marduk happens to be, do we have replies in the comments section?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How many do we have?
Oh, well, right now we just have 4 people in here.
So. Okay. So that's okay. But I hope you guys are understanding that Marduk was the Babylonian sky god. He was also known as Chemosh and Baal. Okay? They burned children. That it should all start coming together. The dots should be connecting. And Marduk was celebrated for his mythical victory over the evil sea goddess, Tiamat. So during a J.B.T., the new king was crowned or the current monarch's rule extended. The king practiced a public ritual of humiliation. This is hilarious. During which he was brought before the statue of Marduk. He was stripped off of his robes, slapped and dragged by the ears in the hope of making him cry. If he cried, this was seen as a sign that Marduk was satisfied and extended that ruler's rulership. Now, I remember, and forgive me for not knowing which story that is, but I think it was Nebuchadnezzar, actually, who had to go through this ritual during Daniel's time. And I read an article on that, so maybe you can look it up, but it was very strange. If you think about a ruler dressed with royalty and robes and everything being slapped and having to cry, and then he's seen fit for more days of ruling in that country. So that's what would happen. But over the centuries, the calendar fell out of sync with the sun. So in 46 BC, Julius Caesar solved the problem. He consulted with mathematicians and astronomers to create a new calendar based on the sun, which resembles the modern Gregorian calendar. Thus, Caesar instituted January 1st as the first day of the year. So that's where the change came from. At first, it was during spring. That was the first of the year. And now we have January 1st as the first day of the year. It is partially in honor of the month's namesake, which is Janus, the Roman god of change and beginnings. I also hope that you guys realize that Janus Capital, one of our investing and banking companies, is named for the Roman god Janus. He is called Janus Bifrons. That's his full name, meaning the god who looks both ways. It explains why Janus has two faces as a representation of his ability to look back into the past and forward into the future. This idea was tied to the concept of transition from one year to the next, from one vision to the next, and growth into adulthood. He was also worshipped at the beginning of harvest season, planting times, marriages, births, deaths, etc. So, to continue, New Year's Day was also sometimes referred to as Dioum Duo, God of Gods, if I read that right. Dium Dio, God of Gods. Janus presided over the creation of religion, life, and other gods. So he's being lifted up as like the King of Kings, the God of Gods, the Almighty. For this reason, he was regarded as the most important Roman god. His name was the first uttered in prayers before even that of Jupiter. Now, we don't have the context from cultural background to know ourselves that was a common practice, that Jupiter was thought to be a great god, and so he was supposed to be usually the first to be spoken of in prayers. But they're mentioning that even before Jupiter, Janus came first. So, all right, the porter's staff and a set of keys were the symbols representing Janus because he was the gatekeeper. We might see that term again. I'm not sure. I might be picking up on it falsely, but I get a feeling that we're going to see that term again. That's why the Latinized name for Janus, which is Ianus, is derived from Ia Bua, meaning door. Very interesting. Gates in Rome, named after Janus, were opened during times of war and closed during times of peace. Because of Rome's constant warring, the gates only closed twice from the 7th to the 1st century BC. These gates were called Jani. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it's there, which represented ceremonial gateways. Usually they were freestanding structures that served as symbolic entrances and exits. These gates were also the subject of superstition. The Roman army had to depart by marching through a Janus. You can see it right there. Two examples and pictures: the Janus Temple in Burgundy, France, and Rome's Janus Geminis, which were all, like they're saying, portals which they would walk through to get into the city. The most famous Janus in Rome was Janus Geminis, which was actually a shrine. So I didn't know that, but that's actually a shrine to Janus. So pagan traditions of this time is that Romans celebrated the first by offering sacrifices to Janus in hopes of gaining good fortune in the new year. They decorated their homes with laurel branches. Okay, so again, if you're new here, there's a whole tradition and culture within paganism of holidays and different worship of certain gods having to do with tree worship. Different trees are allotted and so on. And so now we're being introduced to a new one, laurel branches for Janus. All right. And they spent the day praying. Oh, sorry, partying. That's totally different. Partying. It's a very small print, so forgive me. It was common for friends and family to exchange well wishes and gift figs and honey. Gifts were exchanged because they believed the beginning of anything was an omen for the whole. So good karma, basically. If you give, then you will receive, was their idea. So cakes were made of spelt salt, which were offered to Janus and burnt at the altar. I'm not sure what the salt part is, but okay, so cakes made of spelt were offered to Janus and burnt at the altar. This was not only done during the New Year celebration, but also on the first of each month. So do you see how it starts perpetuating itself? At first we just thought it was January 1st that this happened in honor of Janus. Then all of a sudden it's happening at the first of every month. Okay. So kissing. I've gotten questions about this for New Year's, why we have the ball drop and everyone shares a kiss with their girlfriend or spouse or whomever they're with. Kissing at the moment of transition into the next year is rooted in pagan sexual practice and superstition. The saucy tradition of starting the new year with a smooch can be traced back to the winter festival Saturnalia in honor of Saturn. In ancient Rome, Saturnalia was a mid-December pagan festival that honored Saturn, the agricultural god. This celebration included decorating homes with greenery, like wreaths, grand feasts, gift giving, and socializing with friends and family. Does that sound familiar? So I hope again that a lot of this is all connecting. I'm going to say that over and over again, by the way, but this is our Christmas. Saturnalia, Christmas. So that's not what we're talking about right now, but they're just pointing you back to where the kissing actually came from. It came from that celebration originally. And again, with the trees, the wreaths and all that. So let's go back just a minute here. Last sentence. The winter solstice also meant intoxicated merrymaking, which we can safely assume led to, well, kissing. Warmth and kisses to lovers, friends, and strangers alike to embrace new beginnings. So, if you're wondering why people do that, now you know. Watch night services were conducted to watch out for evil spirits who were believed to roam the earth during these times. Hence comes the tradition of staying up to ring in the new year. Aha. So there's another question that most people have on their minds, including myself. Why do people stay up that late? Well, it's to ward off evil spirits. Okay, eating pork and black-eyed peas on New Year's Day. I don't know if you're one of those people who knew that that was even a tradition. I'm not, so that was interesting. But they say this originates from paying homage to Janus. So, his mythological wife, Karna, goddess of human organs, wow, was, oh, now I've lost my place because that was so shocking to me, was honored during her festival with a dish of fava beans and pork bacon. Okay? The pea and beans symbolize rebirth, and pork or swine was the preferred sacrificial meat to the gods. Huh, interesting. Does that make anyone think hard about why the Bible, if you know this, in Leviticus, and most Christians, I think mostly know this, that we are called in the Bible to especially avoid pork or swine flesh? That's probably why, because it was used, what they're saying is it wasn't just used for this God, but it was used preferably as a sacrificial meat for the gods, plural, gods, S. So, I don't know, I'm just showing you how my brain's working. I'm connecting those dots. So hopefully that's helpful to you too. It's the time of the great spring cleaning. So I've heard that my whole life. It's, oh my goodness, it's time for spring cleaning. Where did we get this tradition? Well, it was a time to purify the herds and the fields before sowing to ensure fertility and prosperity. The farmers roamed the fields equipped with torches and prepared pancakes. Okay, so pancakes come into the mix with the remains of flour from the reserves of the past year. The shape and color of the pancakes reminded people of the sun returning after winter. So, unfortunately, even our beloved pancakes, which I can say I truly do like my pancakes, is wrapped up in a ritual to worship the sun. Sorry, but that is true. So, not to say you can't eat pancakes, but just understand where they come from and I guess don't use them in that way. So, it's a time of, oh, I already read that. I'm sorry. In Britain and the Commonwealth, they are associated with Shrove Tuesday, commonly known as Pancake Day. Okay, so they're really ruining this pancake thing. When historically perishable ingredients had to be used up before the fasting period of Lent. So you'd be really quick about it to get rid of all of your remaining flour and all the stuff that you had, I guess. I don't know what they threw into it, but you would use the remaining flour and water and oil and all this stuff before Lent so that you couldn't binge on it during that time. So that's New Year's Day for you, at least from the general perspective. This comes from the occult definition from the website Wicked Blood. And it says about New Year's that it means to them that it came from the ancient history of ancient civilizations in Mesopotamia and Egypt, where the new year was marked by the return of the sun and the return of the Nile's floodwaters. These early celebrations were often linked to religion and the worship of gods and goddesses. Yes, so they're exactly correct. As the centuries passed, the celebrations of the new year evolved and took on different meanings in different cultures. In ancient Rome, the new year was marked by the festival of Saturnalia, a week-long celebration honoring the god Saturn. In medieval Europe, the new year was soon seen as a time of renewal and spiritual purification and was marked by rituals and ceremonies to honor the gods. Today, New Year's Eve is celebrated in many different ways all over the world, but the underlying theme of renewal and rebirth remain. So as you ring in the new year, take a moment to reflect on the rich history and mystical roots of the beloved holiday. Well, they obviously like that holiday a lot. But they're confirming that this all comes from the same ancient pagan origins that we were speaking of. Druids. Now, usually when you want to know something pretty creepy and, I don't know, occult, like, you're going to want to consult some Druid sources because they still exist today. And they do not sugarcoat anything. They know what's going on. So, this is from Druid Life. They say, so where does all the seasonal stuff leave a Druid? Plenty of Druid folks, no doubt, did stay up to toast the rolling on of the numbers, even though what we're counting is years from the supposed birth date of Christ. But it's a good excuse to party, and most pagans don't need And most pagans don't need much excuse at all. It's another opportunity for excess. In case you didn't get enough of that in during the Christmas bit, and then we all throw out our trees, our bags, and bags of post-party detritus, go to landfills, and we shuffle grimly through January. The amount we waste and throw away at this time of year makes me want to weep, but it's all in the name of good fun. And it's mean of me to say that people shouldn't have a good time, right? So, I don't know, it's very interesting for me to hear a druid say that it's always a good excuse for excess. I hear this all the time from pagans, or like when I've looked on forums or done my research. Why, most of the time, one of their biggest traditions is always to drink till you are completely drunk. Across the board, all of them are into that, because when you can, always indulge in excess. Always. I've never seen them not do that with drugs, with alcohol, with sex, everything. So, down at the bottom, it also says the partying that is daily life helps us drown out reality. So, why they do this? Because they don't want to be in their right mind and they don't want to face reality. My guess is they don't want to face the reality that they have regrets. They have problems just like anyone else that they should actually be facing. And we all need a savior, so we need God's help to get rid of them. And it is heavy. It weighs heavy on them. All the stuff that they're doing each night that goes by when they drink and don't know what happened maybe the next morning, or they do, and it's just shame and guilt that they're packing down. And so it's just really sad. It's really sad that it's all about forgetting about reality and what's really going on around you. They also add, pile in the easy calories, the booze, the brain-free entertainments. If you find yourself thinking at all, grab another beer. It'll be fine. Keep running, keep buying, keep consuming. Whatever you do, don't sober up emotionally, because when you do, the mother of all psychological hangovers will be waiting. Culturally, this is what we do all the time. So they can tell you without a doubt that this is what they're doing, why they're doing it, and that above all, you don't want to be sober. It also says off to the side, it's all about following your heart. I hope you hear that. I hope you're getting that from this. Whatever feels good. It's all about pleasure. So it's all about following your heart, acting with integrity, living fully in the moment. And I'm not sure what they mean by acting with integrity, but living fully in the moment, I can see that. It's not about going along with convention just for the sake of it, acting without thinking or using chemical props to hide the inner darkness. Embrace the inner darkness. So now they're even going a step further. They're telling you it's not just about paying no attention to reality. It's actually embracing the darkness, bringing it on in your life and embracing it. That's really scary, isn't it? So they say, embrace the inner darkness. Be at ease with the doubts and fears. And go to the party anyway. Or walk beneath the stars, or both. Embracing balance of chaos within. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. So that was truly interesting to me. I don't know what else to word. It was amazing to hear them say that they know what they're doing when they're doing this and why they're promoting other people to do it as well. And they're very, very convincing partiers that they make you look like you don't have fun in your life and like you should be partying because you're missing out so much. Okay. So, January 3rd, this is a Society of Jesus holiday called the Most Holy Name of Jesus. They say that in 1597, Pope Sixtus V, I think, is that? I'm not very good at Roman numerals. Most people aren't these days. Granted an indulgence to anyone reverently saying, Praise be Jesus Christ. Pope, maybe that was Clement, I'm not sure. Clement, the 7th. Again, you're finding out how bad I am with Roman numerals. It's a fine pair right there. But in 1530, allowed the Franciscans to celebrate a feast day in honor of the Holy Name, and Pope Innocent the 13th extended this to the Universal Church in 1721. What is the Universal Church? Do we know? Well, actually, Catholic Church means universal church. Catholic means universal. So sometimes you need to decode that because it's almost like very cryptic. They're just telling you it's the Catholic Church. And most of the time they don't want to say it because they don't want people to understand that the Roman Catholic Church had like all the control in those days. Still does today, because whenever we refer on programs like TV, news, media, everywhere, when it's written the church, it means Roman Catholic Church. You don't ever see any other denomination mentioned as the church, truly. And when we claim that it's our church that we're talking about, as colloquially as we will, it never means actually our Protestant church. It's always the Catholic Church. So just a tidbit there. So the feast day of the Most Holy Name of Jesus, right after Universal Church in 1721, the feast day was celebrated on the Sunday between January 1st and 6th, or otherwise on January 2nd. Dropped in 1969, Pope John Paul II reinstituted the Feast of the Holy Name of Jesus to be celebrated on January 3rd. So they changed the name, they changed the date a little bit, but it's the same. Moreover, the reverential invocation of the Holy Name of Jesus was part of prayer or work, and the recitation of the litany of the Holy Name of Jesus still convey a partial indulgence for the reparations of sin. So, a penance, indulgence. You're basically buying your way into heaven, or buying possibly one of your relatives or your friends' way into heaven if you say this litany or reciting this prayer for them. So we all know, hopefully, I know there's people who don't, unfortunately, but there's many times when we know in the Bible it tells you not to pray repetitive prayers. And that is, I'm not sure how exactly that verse goes word for word, but it's pretty much nonsense to God. He does not respect that in your prayers. He doesn't want to hear repetitive prayers recited over and over again for different people. He wants you to be personal with him and tell him very honestly what you need, what you want. He's not a vending machine, but he just needs you to be honest with him, and it doesn't include repetitive mantras or reciting prayers or memorized prayers. So that's what this had a part of it as a ritual, but it also had, also the Holy Name Society, first organized in 1274 and granted the status of a co-fraternity in 1564, continues to promote at the parish and diocesan levels an increased reverence for the name of Jesus, reparation for the sin of profanity and blasphemy against the holy name, and the personal sanctification of its members. So taking it a whole step further, if you recite this prayer, if you are going to do this and keep the holy name of Jesus as they are specifying, this would actually clear you of all sins of profanity and blasphemy against God, against his name. And those of the fraternities, so here we're talking about, and I don't know if you know this, but this is kind of like secret societies having their sins fully removed and eradicated, I forget, pardoned by the Catholic Church if they say this prayer for specifically profanity and blasphemy, which they do say was a personal sanctification. It actually sanctified its members, which no one can have. It just doesn't exist. So it was a very erroneous way of doing things. And that is what January 3rd is. So January 6th, we have Epiphany. Let's just take one moment here because this has a lot of overlap. So Epiphany. Epiphany was known for being one thing within Wiccanism and another thing within the Roman Catholic Church or the Church. When we say Christianity as well, I might clarify this right now also. I try to on most shows. When we say Christianity, this is actually the Roman Catholics' view of Christians or Christianity, which there's a problem with that because, again, it's not what you and I believe. We call ourselves Christians, but if you actually talk to a Muslim as well, at least that was in my experience, they asked me if I'm a Christian, and I said yes because I was a follower of Jesus Christ. They automatically assumed that I was a follower of the Pope when I said I'm a Christian. You don't want that. Automatically, there was huge amounts of hate coming my way. And that was because they've been taught that Christians worship in different ways that I guess they hold true to the ancient terms of Christianity, which is you're Roman Catholic. You worship the church. The Pope is the infallible representation of Christ here on earth, and that whatever they do will be pardoned, that they do in Christ's name, even though they've done so many heinous things. And so I can understand their hatred of me when I said I was a Christian automatically. Unfortunately, it's not so. So I don't know. There's creative ways. There's different ways maybe that you want to say that you are a follower of Christ or you believe in Jesus. You don't always have to say you're a Christian because that can get you in trouble sometimes. And it doesn't mean the same things to all different denominations or different cultures. So be careful with that. That's exactly what they're talking about here. So, Epiphany in the Wiccan world is known as La Befana, which would be visually familiar because she looks like a witch, complete with the raggedy clothes, a pointy hat, and a warded nose. She even flies about on a broomstick. She appears annually on the eve of Epiphany, which is the 5th of January, they say, the 12th day of Christmas. Now, I don't know, this is very interesting. They also say the one Christians mark as the day that the 3 wise men greet baby Jesus with gifts. There's the overlap there of what can be misconstrued as Christian and the Wiccan definition and why this actually exists, why Epiphany exists. So La Befana, it goes on to say, has her contemporary name, most probably, which comes from Epiphania, the Italian for Epiphany. Despite no mention of her anywhere in the gospel, the story goes on to say that La Befana failed to give directions to the 3 wise men when they came asking about the location of Jesus. But she did offer them food and shelter, which was jolly decent of her. So, Have you heard of the connection between pagans putting food out for Santa at Christmas? I hope so. I think most people have heard of that. This is a highly common tradition in pagan worship where you always offer food and drink at an altar to the gods. I hope that's ringing a bell also. So all of a sudden you have a story that's almost promoting this. It is advocating for you to do this, and this exactly supposedly happened even in Jesus' story. So it also says, after the wise chaps left, La Befana decided that she wanted to see Jesus as well. So she gathered some gifts and set off. But she never found him, so instead she leaves his gifts for other kids. Oh, okay, for other kids. The alternate version of this tale is that she does find Jesus and gifts him up. I'm not sure what that means. Whichever way, she comes across quite well in both tales. So she's always portrayed in a very good light. She gives him gifts if she did find him. And usually you'll find that. It's always hearsay, it's legend, it's mythology. There's always little twists you can find within these tales where if she didn't find him, then she gave gifts to the children. So she's always a good figure of goodwill. So that's where the idea of a witch, and to their credit, they love this story because it makes them look like they're good people. That's why it's used. But other possible sources of origin, and the most plausible, is via the ancient pre-Christian. So I love actually going into the pre-Christian traditions and ancient origins because you're really going to get the true origins from that. You're not going to learn what the Catholic Church dictated as, I guess, their false reasons why we have holidays. They always have a different reason. So they call it the Roman festival of Saturnalia. So here we go. It points back to that again. A 2-week affair that began just before the winter solstice and ended in the new year when the pagans would walk up to the temple of Juno, stood atop the arcs on Capitoline Hill. Wow. So we have Capitol Hill near the White House. We were just there this last week. And Capitoline Hill sounds very, very familiar. So there's that connection. I don't know if, what we're gonna find and what's gonna happen there, but interesting point that I had to make. So they would go to Capitoline Hill to have their futures read by an old woman. So here we have fortune telling and divination, probably using astronomy as well, by an old woman who was probably a witch. And here it's not impossible to imagine that it might be in the pagans' interest to offer the old soothsayer gifts to ensure that they, in return, were gifted with well-being in the new year. Could this be, and quite honestly, is this the true meaning of New Year's? This is the way it was really kept in ancient traditions. I think they're telling the truth. I think this is really what did happen. And now we have Epiphany, we have Christmas, and all these other things that are twisted, kind of turned upside down on their head, and to mean that somehow it's a Christian origin that belies beneath all of this. Like it's somewhere there, but I don't think there really is. So that's just my 2 cents. last paragraph there, but irrespective of the etymology, little Italian kids these days will recognize La Befana as a magical being who travels around the skies on a broomstick and after climbing down a chimney, fills the good... Sorry, I have to laugh. I'm sorry. Fills the good children's stockings full of sweets and presents, and the bad kids with a lump of coal. So the idea of Santa Claus came from an old witch's tale. Whoever tells you that? Okay. Though it's not really coal that they give to the kids in Italy, it's more like a lump of delicious black caramel. Hang on. Access through a chimney? They have it written right here. This is amazing. They're going to tell you. Stockings filled with gifts or coal? Transcendental unseen flight? On a broomstick, I might add. Does that sound just a bit familiar? Or is it just a coincidence that St. Nicholas, the official name for Santa Claus, is still celebrated in Eastern Christian countries using the old church calendar with a day of feasting on the 6th of December, aka the Epiphany? It would seem that outside of Italy, Santa Claus has taken on the role of La Befana for the 25th of December. But Santa is well known in Italy. So what does that mean? It simply means that Italian kids get to be the recipient of gifts from two festive deities. Oh, wow, they even have it written there. As opposed to the one most of us get to have. So Santa Claus and La Befana. Okay, then we have St. Winebald Day, which most of us probably haven't heard of. I know I didn't until I started looking at the satanic holidays. I have it listed down there in the white and highlighted in yellow. It is, we're going to get to that one. It is January 7th above that one on that list, St. Winebald Day. Now, if we're looking at that on the list given, it says right across, if you go right across to it, it is a celebration of blood. They usually have a blood sacrifice that happens on Winebald Day. It is, its usage there is listed as animal and or human sacrifice and dismemberment. And the age of the victim must be, they don't give an age, but they're supposed to specify what the victim is supposed to be like. It has to be male if it is human. So that is the satanic holiday ritual. Now we're going to find out, first of all, I'd like to look at this. This is an occult, purely occult holiday. It says, this day is to honor Winebald, originally called Winibald, who was a German who became a Roman Catholic priest. Okay. I'm not shocked about that. Around 737, Boniface visited Rome. He must have been a popular, politician or maybe the ruler at that time. I'm not great at history and they don't tell us yet who that is. But by this time, his brother, Willibald, had returned from his travels and had become a monk at Mont Cassino. Boniface recruited both nephews for the German mission. Willibald was ordained and based in Einstat. I hope I said that, Einstat. Boniface received a promise that Winibald would go to Germany. Winibald arrived in Thuringia, on the 30th of November, 740, and was ordained priest. So He was placed in charge of 7 churches, including one at, oh man, I can't say this, Erfurt. This is German, remember, so it's going to be different. But Winibald established a monastery in Schwanfeld, but in 742 transferred it to Heidenheim, where the brothers founded a double monastery for the training of priests and a center of learning. Winibald, here's where it all comes together. It makes it sound as though he created the first monastery. I'm not sure that's true, but what we do know is that it's highlighted in red. He became the first abbot. So that is why he's being memorialized on that day, January the 7th. So why, I don't know if you've ever asked yourself this, but I'm going to ask myself this right now, and you. Why would an occult holiday be memorializing a Roman Catholic priest that became the first abbot? Why would they care about the holy days of basically the Roman Catholic Church? That is shocking to me. It's stumping me, because I don't know if you've ever thought about that connection. Is there actually connection between occult and satanic things and Roman Catholic things? I hope that I'm not blowing anyone away. I hope I'm not offending, but this is just directly from this. Has anyone thought of that? They're showing a huge connection. This is incredible. So they also said that in art, Saint Winibald is portrayed as an abbot with a bricklayer's trowel. Do we know what a bricklayer's trowel, usually in Freemasonry, symbolizes? I'm not sure what it symbolizes, by the way. I said that wrong. But a bricklayer's trowel is very important in Freemasonry. So there's another connection. Very interesting. He is a patron saint of construction workers. That is very common. Usually Freemasons were bricklayers, masons. They were the first construction workers that really knew how to work with bricks and mortar really well. That was kind of their underground career while they dwelt in the secret society and carried out the agenda of the secret society underneath everything they did in life. So that totally does not surprise me, but I don't know if you knew that. So that is St. Winibald Day. So far we are only to January 17th, but I want to just cover that right in the same, that's what I meant to do. I created these slides so that you could see St. Winibald Day, and we could also go down to January 17th, as it is highlighted there, as Satanic Revels Day. Occult people have on their list of holidays, as you'll see here on this list, they have several dates that are satanic revels, where satanic interaction with people happens, where you're supposedly reveling in these satanic mysteries. And this one on January 17th is said to be sexual. That's what they would do to the victim. It would be oral, anal, and vaginal. And the age of the victim would need to be at least 7 years old to 17 and must be female. Okay. Again, that's purely occult. On their calendar, that's where it was found on the others. Although I don't doubt, quite honestly, that there is a connection, that when we find it just on one calendar, I believe that most all of these are offshoots of each other in a brotherhood. Although they might have a different brotherhood name, they all are in basically different secret societies where they all adhere to usually the same ideology, but in a little bit of a different way. So they probably keep the same rituals and rites as well. But then we get to January 20th through the 27th, Again, that's the occult one. It is mentioned in the legend up on the right-hand corner, but it is on this satanic holiday list as well. I guess I'll read that. It says, this day is for abduction, ceremonial preparation, and holding of sacrificial victim for Candlemas. We are going to see what Candlemas is very soon, but they would start abducting people for this. It was for sexual and blood sacrifices. It is including oral, anal, vaginal, and human sacrifice completely. So at the very end, they would completely kill the human being. It must be female or a child of any age. All right, so none of this is going to be happy, pleasurable things to point out, but I just want you to be aware because it all truly gets you a deeper and fuller understanding of what these holidays really are about. So, thank God we covered that. Now we're at the other occult holiday, January 29th, which is called Saint Agnes Eve. I have it on there as well. It says that it is for casting of spells. This is a day that they would do that. And so here's the story behind it. Agnes was a beautiful young Christian girl. Again, interesting they would say Christian because the name Christian came not from our Bibles, which most people think. Because in the true Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic that the Bible was written in, the name Christian, from everything I've seen, is not actually the true translation. You don't find that when you go back into those translations. So the word Christian, in my understanding, came again from the church, the Catholic church that was dominating everything. So let's read that again. It was Agnes, a beautiful young Christian girl of a good family who lived in Rome in the early 4th century. The son of a Roman prefect wanted to marry her, but she refused him because she was in love with another, Christ. Okay. Who was better than he, as she had decided to devote herself to religious purity. Out of jealousy, the young man denounced Agnes as a Christian, and she was sent to a brothel as punishment. So here it's strange because in those days, they're showing that it would signify almost that if you were a Christian in those days, you were going to be punished and tormented and persecuted. However, again, like I just said, when they say that they are Christian and the Christ that they mean is a different Christ than a Protestant would be claiming. It is the Catholic definition of being a Christian. And I don't know if you knew that, but when you really get down to it, it's a different Christ, Jesus, that they are worshiping and that they mean. So she was found out. He sent her to a brothel, and there she was spared several terrible ordeals. According to one legend, all the men who attempted to rape her were immediately struck blind or paralyzed. In another, her virginity was preserved by thunder and lightning from heaven. Now condemned as a witch and sentenced to be burnt to death. How interesting. I just have to pause right there. Because she said she believed in Christ, here's an interesting connection. And it was truly the Roman Catholic definition of being a Christian. She's being called a witch. How do you get that? This is either a very, very enlightening term for what the Catholic Church really means when you're being a Christian, or it's just a really twisted, turned on its head type of, connection that they're specifying here. That if you're a Christian, you were supposedly said to be a witch. Hopefully that makes sense. But she was condemned as a witch and sentenced to death to be burned. The young martyr was tied to the stake, but the wood would not burn. One of the guards then beheaded her with his sword. Agnes was only 12 or 13 years old when she died. So they've now turned this girl, with all of the different twists and turns of paganism in the story, into a martyr. And now she is memorialized every January 29th. They say that when her parents visited her tomb 8 days later, they were met by a chorus of angels, including Agnes, with a white lamb by her side. The lamb, a symbol of purity, is one of the symbols associated with Saint Agnes. This is strange. Saint Agnes is the patron saint of chastity, girls, engaged couples, rape victims, and virgins. That's quite a slew of different things which she presides over. One is purity, the other is rape. It's like, it seriously is the chaos in order together in the yin and yang. Like, they cannot exist without each other, which is not true, but that's how strange this is getting. Traditionally, the night when girls and unmarried women wishing to dream of their future husbands would perform certain rituals of divination before going to bed. So this is what you do on that day. That's why they said casting spells. Bizarrely, these rituals included transferring pins one by one from a pin cushion to a sleeve while reciting the Lord's Prayer. Again, the Lord's Prayer usually is very highly spoken of and recited within the Catholic denomination, while walking backwards upstairs to bed or fasting all day. Another tradition was to eat a portion of a dumb cake. It actually was the name of it. Dumb cake, a salty confection prepared with friends in total silence and reciting a spell before retiring to bed, hoping to dream of a future love. In Scotland, girls would meet in a field of crops at midnight, throw grain onto the soil, and pray. I hope you get this. This is starting to sound like a coven meeting of casting spells, drawing your circle, all that stuff that is in Wiccanism, the witchcraft. In Rome, on her feast day, 2 white lambs are offered at the sanctuary rails in her church. In her church. Did you get that? It is the Catholic Church again. While a hymn is sung in her honor. The wool from the lambs is used to weave the pallium, part of the vestments worn by the archbishops in the Latin Church. Maybe I don't know enough about that, but okay, that makes sense. The custom may have been derived from the folk etymology of her name. Lamb in Latin is Agnes. Okay. Again, you'll see over and over again, there's always a cake. There's always a bread that is baked in celebration of these gods as a ritual, as part of the rituals and traditions. So this is what they would do. And unfortunately, I found that, in the Wiccan community, there are several, this is how you manifest as well. This is a huge connection to manifesting. That you stay silent and you have friends over and everything. You share a meal together. You have these specific cakes and breads you eat. But mostly what you do say, the only thing that is really allowed to be said, is what you want to have happen. What you want to have actually given to you by the spirit world. And that is because that's how Satan and his demons work. If they can't read your mind and they can't really know what's happening with you, except for what they do know about human behavior and what you might be thinking or feeling and how to trap you and stuff. And they study you specifically to know where your generational sins or where your particular temptations are. But otherwise, they cannot read your mind. So you always have to speak into the, air, which he is the prince and power of the air. Satan is what you want from him. And so there's the connection anyway. I hope that makes sense. I really hope that completely makes sense, that it's manifestation that they are teaching you, which is not a godly or Christian principle. So that is St. Agnes, Eve. There's a little bit more on this, a lot more connections I found. That while the dumb supper has come to be more commonly known today as a ritual used to honor the dead and our ancestors, its origins are said to lie in a divination rite used to foretell one's future spouse. And in some rural regions of the United States, particularly within the Appalachian, Southern, and Ozark regions, the use of the term dumb supper is still mostly used when speaking of the divinatory practice. They're admitting it's a divining and where it's being used, but I did not know, they're adding to this, that it was used as a ritual to honor the dead and our ancestors. So ancestor worship, a big thing again, that in the Bible, Jesus, as a Christian, we are not told to worship any other human beings or ancestors or anything. First of all, they can't hear us. They can't do anything. They're dead in the ground. And so they can't get us anything either. Only God has the divine power to hear us, to answer our prayers, to do anything. He is the only one that has power. Otherwise, we're all just humans. So those connections are made. They also say that dumb cakes were once part of an enormous tradition of soothsaying foodstuffs. So there was other food items you apparently made when you were trying to divine and tell your fortune or the future. Rings hidden in cakes and mashed potatoes could reveal who was next to be wed, while an apple peel tossed over your shoulder might very well fall into the shape of the first initial of your future spouse. These traditions took place on the liminal celebratory days of the year when mystical or seasonal change was nigh. Halloween, Christmas Eve, and solstices, for example. So I'm going to take a close look real quick. That came from crowbones.com. That is a Wiccan website. So I wanted to emphasize that they are telling you specifically it's a very heartfelt tradition they keep, especially on Halloween, Christmas Eve, and solstices. Okay. So we have also from Practical Magic, which I believe is the book by Aleister Crowley. It says here, St. Agnes Eve, January 20th. So tonight is, I'm sorry. I remember reading this. This is another Wiccan or occult Satanist member writing about how she keeps St. Agnes Eve. And I put this in here, of course, not to subject us to witchcraft practices, but to understand that they can vary, like they were saying. And she has a very interesting way of doing this that connects with today. So she says, tonight is St. Agnes's Eve, and is a powerful night for love magic of all kinds, but especially for calling a lover to you. Pause right there for a minute. We are not acquainted, especially as Christians, with love magic, but it is a big deal. You hear this again. Oh my goodness. I heard this from Megan Fox. She said she used love magic to manifest Machine Gun Kelly. You hear this from celebrities. You always hear it in Shrek. Shrek, the movie, is a good example. You have movies that are directly showing you love magic, which is witchcraft. And so we need to be careful with this. This is not at all godly. And we have so much of it infiltrating our minds and our thoughts so that it seems like it's all just child's play. It's fun. It's not bad at all. That's not the case. So let's continue. So a powerful night for love magic of all kinds, but especially for calling a lover to you. There are several old myths designed to help you dream of your future spouse's face. According to the Gypsy Magic website, some of these include boiling an egg, removing the yolk and filling the center with salt, and then eating the whole shell included. Wow. Sticking 9 pins into a red onion, taking it back to the bedroom and sleeping with it under the pillow. A dumb cake ceremony, like we already had it described. She says miraculous thunderstorms saved her. She wants to give the definition of how this works and her history of St. Agnes, because her story, again, varies. Miraculous thunderstorm saved her from rape. St. Agnes Day is January 21st. So there is always discrepancy with those who keep the solstice. They're sometimes on the ancient calendar or day versus the day we have come to in our day and age, which is January 29th. So there's always certain occult members that are, I don't know, kind of at least between usually January 21st to 29th. They'll always give a range of time. You keep that holiday, whichever one they're talking about, and it's fine. But they say one of the oldest superstitions associated with this night is that if she went to bed without looking behind her and lay on her back with her hands under her head, that he would appear in her dream, kiss her, and feast with her. But personally, every year I perform the spell listed in this book. The basic instructions of the spell say that right before bed, you should light a pink candle anointed with the love oil of your choice. Okay? And stare into a hand mirror. While looking into the mirror, you say, "Dear St. Agnes, sweet and fair." Does this sound like a Disney movie to you? Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? Which I know is not truly how it's said. Yeah, it's magic mirror on the wall. But this is Snow White. This is love magic for you. So, it's amazing. It is amazing how stooped our culture is in all of this mythology, magic, witchcraft, all the way through. So this takes us to February 1st or 2nd, which is St. Bridget's Day or Candlemas. So here you've heard the word Candlemas. Probably, I think we've heard it twice now. Now we're actually going to figure out what it is. But it's also known as St. Bridget's Day. Now, what has St. Bridget got to do with Candlemas? Okay. Well, quite a lot, actually, they say. She began her life as a pagan goddess and ended up a Christian saint. So I'm so glad they said this, because this is true. This is how these things, they always are coming from a pagan mythology origin, somehow deemed a saint in the Christian holidays. How is that? Why is that? Like, it's so wrong, but I'm glad that they're admitting it. So let's continue. Bridget was the fire and fertility goddess, and in her temple at Kildare, she was tended by the Vestal Virgins who kept the eternal fire going. Most people don't know anything about this. That's why I'm looking at you kind of like, oh my goodness.
You're going to talk about that?
I am going to be talking about that, yes. Probably more around I'm going to be doing my my lecture, I guess, on the Olympics. That will come into play as well. But we also have Vestal Virgins, and we're going to cover as much as we get into it tonight. But Vestal Virgins are pretty much today's... Actually, I won't pop that for you. That'll be a surprise for you. They still exist today. And they would keep the eternal fire going. I hope that you've heard of like Lucifer's torch and the eternal flame, which is kept in his temple by beautiful young women. That's what we're talking about here. So they just call it the eternal flame most of the time, but that's what it signifies here. On her feast day, her statue was carried into the sea to be washed, which is purification, and then traveled around in a cart surrounded by candles. They say Bridget was the daughter of a chieftain and a slave woman, and was raised in a druid's household before becoming a consecrated virgin. It's amazing. They always seem to give clues of where these tales are coming from, the pagan origins that they are coming from. And she is patroness of many things, including poetry, learning, healing, protection, blacksmithing, livestock, and dairy production. She racked up 46 miracles according to one of her very first biographers, narrowly trumping Jesus himself. Wow. Okay. In time, Saint Bridget herself would become in Gael. I'm not sure what that says. Mary of the Irish. Is it any wonder? Is it any wonder that now she's being known as Mary, the mother of Jesus? As venerable as the Blessed Virgin Mary, there you go, Mother of Christ, and second only to Saint Patrick in the hierarchy of patron saints. Okay, this is just crazy. Strangely, also, the story is that Bride, okay, get to know her as that, because there's going to be a huge connection. So Bride, or Bridget, was taken by the angels to the nativity to serve as a handmaiden to Mary. The legends about this Bridget gradually became associated with Saint Bridget, who founded the first convent in Ireland. Okay, so think back again. If the Roman Catholic Church, or their rites and their holidays and everything, don't matter, why is there a connection back to this occult holiday? It is in red, by the way. This is a purely occult holiday. Why do they care? Why would they be celebrating? Why would there be this thread as for Saint Winibald, the first abbot? Okay. Now her, who was the first, what did they say? I'm sorry. Who founded the first convent in Ireland. Okay. Why would that matter? Why would we be memorializing that? If there wasn't a connection back to the occult origins within Roman Catholicism. Okay. It's a good question. Sorry. I'm just going to leave you with that. So it also goes on to say, she founded the first convent in Ireland at Kildare, of course. In the Highlands, on this day, women dress a corn doll and put her in a basket, which is called the bride's bed. Then a wand, candle, or other phallic object is laid across her. Okay. In time, the Roman Catholic Church was wont to do, superimposed a Christian festival on a pagan one. 40 days after the birth of a male child, which is 80 days if it was a girl, and what is all that about, they say. Jewish women went through a purification ceremony. In the 6th century, 2nd of February, which is 39 days after Christmas, it was declared the Feast of Purification of Mary, thereby forging a link between the 2 days. So now they're connecting the Christian, quote unquote, okay, I'm going to have to do that, Christian holiday origin, supposedly, with a pagan one. Okay. The custom was that candles were brought to church on this day to be blessed. When they were taken home, they act as talismans and protection from disaster. Liturgy, again, liturgy, I hope you understand that, is the clergymen, actually, of the Roman Catholic Church. Liturgy loves candles. Have you noticed that? I mean, candles are everywhere in cathedrals, in Roman Catholic churches. I know that they're in other churches too, but usually that's for another topic, another time. They usually highly are patterned after the Roman Catholic Church, though, so we're just going to stick with that. We're just going to talk about that. Once blessed by a Catholic priest, St. Bridget's cross, as it became known, symbolized protection, particularly from fire, evil spirits, and hunger. In the Celtic traditions, the cross represents the sun. Okay, sun worship again. And people would and still do weave them on Bridget's Eve to ask for Bridget's protection for the home or their hearth. I found that in other references, but I didn't put it there, but it's hearth as well. Food-wise, you might want to enjoy some pancakes. Okay, food-wise, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Food-wise, you might want to enjoy some pancakes. Again, what was up with the pancakes? It was sun worship again. This is probably because Shrove Tuesday can fall pretty close to Candlemas. But it also is good to eat grain-based foods, so cakes will do. Pancakes are considered sun symbols because of their shape and golden color. Again, this is amazing because it came from a different source of what we had found out about pancakes and the sun and so on earlier. But I don't know if you probably don't know, but the whole idea of putting a young girl in this, you're creating a corn doll that's supposed to symbolize a little girl being basically penetrated and impregnated by a male with their phallic organ. That's what they had said there, right here. In the 16th century, 2nd of February, I'm sorry, that was not right. Let's go up here, second paragraph. The legends about this Bridget gradually became associated with St. Bridget, who founded the first convent in Ireland at Kildare, of course. In the Highlands on this day, women dressed a corn doll and put her in a basket, the bride's bed. Then a wand, candle, or other phallic object is laid across her. Why would they use the word phallic if they didn't mean for that sexual intercourse innuendo to be there? So that's really what they're telling you. They know exactly why this holiday exists. It's for that reason. They're wanting to take advantage of young girls. So, the Vestal Virgins. Let's talk about this a little bit. This is, it came about in the late 12th century. Gerald of Wales wrote that 19 nuns took turns in keeping a perpetual fire burning at Kildare. So this is in honor of St. Bridget. So this began again, St. Bridget. She influenced a lot of things, and none of them were really positive. And that this fire was kept burning since Bridget's time. It has been suggested that fire originally belonged to a temple of Bridget, the goddess. So now you have Bridget and you have Bridget. What they're doing is they're introducing you to what is usually known as the triple goddess or the Celtic Trinity, where you have the triple knot that signifies this. You have Bridget, you have Bridget, as they're saying here. And then you have another one that comes into it, which is usually Brittany. And they're all goddesses of mythology. So when you do the triple Celtic knot on you and you think it's a Christian symbol, it is not, unfortunately. So, the Roman goddess Vesta and the Greek goddess Hestia had perpetual flames or fires tended by priestesses. That's where this comes from. That's really at the root of it, is the worship of Vesta and Hestia. According to Gerald, it was ringed by a hedge that no man was allowed to cross, lest he be cursed. But if Brigid, the saint, was many things, so too was the goddess of the same name. Interesting. The supposed Celtic goddess is known as the triple goddess. Here we go. They're actually explaining it. She was goddess of both the alchemical power of fire and the healing power of water. Now it's elements of witchcraft that she presides over. She's the goddess of the alchemy between those things. Alchemy, of course, is purely occult. It is witchcraft. It is worship of those things and what it can get you and what it can make in casting spells, usually. So I'll make my point that is kind of going nuts in my brain in a minute. But Vesta, goddess of the home and hearth, is symbolized by and resides in her sacred fire. In antiquity, her fire burned in Roman homes as well as in the inner sanctum of her temples in the Roman Forum and other cities throughout the empire. The ancient Romans believed that Vesta's fire protected their world, families, and lives, and that if the fire went out, Rome would fall to invading barbarian armies. To prevent this from happening, an order of Vestal priestesses was created to keep the eternal flame alight in Vesta's temple. The Vestal order was Rome's only full-time, get this, it's its only full-time state-funded priesthood. By guarding the flame, the Vestals ensured the Pax Dorium, which means the peaceful contract between the gods and humankind that would remain unbroken. Because Vesta is a virgin goddess of fire. She is a virgin goddess and fire is a purifying element. 6 young girls were selected as priestesses and took a 30-year vow of chaste service to the goddess. 30 years. That's crazy. Vestals lived a life of luxury, privilege, and relative independence. They were influential in the political sphere and were venerated and worshipped by society at large. They were, told they were praised, basically. Praised is the word I'm looking for. Praised by society. And after their 30 years of service, they were free to leave the order as wealthy women who were still young enough to marry and perhaps even have children. Some did choose to marry. As rich, well-connected women, they were certainly desirable wives, but many chose to stay with the order. I'll read the last part real quick before saying what I'm going to. A phallus, this is from Fandom website. They're going to talk about Vesta. This is really interesting. A phallus rose from the hearth of Vesta in Numa's place. And what is phallus again? The male reproductive organ. And Ocresia was the first to see it. She immediately informed the king and queen, and King Tarquinius. It doesn't matter that you don't know these names. I don't either. It's just the mythology. It's just a story, but this is where they get their traditions and rituals from. So this king, upon hearing this, was astonished. But Tanaquil, whose knowledge of divination was well known, told him it was a blessing that a birth by the hearth's phallus and a mortal woman would produce superior offspring. So here you're having that hybrid of divinity and the gods into humankind through impregnation of a female is meant to be happening, supposedly. The king then chose Ocresia to have intercourse with it, for she had seen it first, during which either Vulcan or the tutelary deity of the house appeared to her. Interesting how Star Trek has Vulcans in it. And there's the tutelary deity of the house. After disappearing, she conceived and delivered Tutulium, or Tutulius. When something appears to you like that, it's usually not godly, it's a demonic presence that appears, especially through sexual things. And so, oh my goodness, I just can't. Okay, today we still have the Order of the Vestal Virgins. They live in convents, and they're called nuns. And many of them, if you have ever seen news or you know of documentaries where they tell their story, they're separated into different classes sometimes, or they're given different tasks to do, but most of them have to tend their hearth, the home, the convent, as a collective group. And this whole practice of being the bride of Christ, you might have heard that by so many priests and the Catholic Church, is this practice. It's unfortunate that many of them sign up to be a nun and devote their lives to Christ, but they are raped by the priests there to produce offspring for other rituals, quite honestly. I will not tell you which ones yet. You'll get to that as we go through the holidays. But that is really all they're there for. And the men, even though they both take a vow of chastity, that's why you find the tunnels between the convents and the monasteries and abbeys and so on that have buried babies' bones, and cemeteries full of babies that are dead. Because there's another thing I didn't tell you, that Vestal Virgins, and most people won't say this because it's so disgusting, if they were found to have been unchaste and they lost their virginity and got pregnant, they would be buried alive in a hole without food. That was said to be a merciful death, where they didn't die, I guess, by sword or fire or anything else, but they just died naturally through starvation. And that was so that they could always say that the priests, and they could say the priests were always chaste and they were doing their job right, and the Vestal Virgins had not compromised the nation of Rome's success, dominance, and purity, and honoring the gods as well, so that war would not come upon them. You have, what have you, harvest would be plentiful, all these things that would go so wrong if apparently these Vestal Virgins were found pregnant, having not kept that vow. And so it does seem that they were after human sacrifice again, child sacrifice, quite honestly, in this ritual. And it's just really sad. This is a hard truth for a lot of people to understand. But that is why we have nuns and convents today. So we have to understand a little bit more, apparently, about how this all connects. St. Bridget's Day connects with Druid Iona. And they say right here, this is coming from Daily Meditations with Matthew Fox. I don't know who he is, but it says St. Bridget, Druidic Ecumenicism, and the Divine Feminine. So we're going to learn a lot through here. It says, one story tells us Bridget's mother was a Christian and her father a Druid, or spiritual leader in pre-Christian Celtic society. Iona was a sacred site for Druidic pilgrims before St. Columba in the 6th century. The name Hebrides means the islands of Bridget, or bride. Thus, she stands for a symbol of continuity in the Celtic world between one age of wisdom and the next. The pre-Christian and Christian merge with Bridget. The Book of Leinster, a 12th century Irish manuscript, says Bridget was a druidess, or leader in that community, to which the oak tree was very sacred. Druids worship oak trees, basically, and they do lots of their rituals that are very disgusting and sexual under oak trees because that's a sacred place. And with its roots in the earth and its reach for the sky, it connected earth and heaven. So that's what the reason they give for doing it in around oak trees and oak groves, I guess. Kildare means Church of the Oaks. So there you have it. St. Bridget, if this is true, she actually created this entire convent with the name Kildare, which gives honor, again, to oaks. Why would you have that if she wasn't a druid? Why would you be worshiping or giving praise or memorializing, again, an oak? It just doesn't make sense. But it says, Kildare means Church of the Oaks, and Bridget saw Christ as her druid. So this is how twisted and disgusting and ridiculous it gets when she was supposedly a Christian girl at the beginning of what we said, who was claiming to be Christian and devoted to Christ. This is actually the Christ she meant. Christ was a druid in her estimation, and she was devoted to him. So, the last sentence there is the pre-Christian earth goddess was Bridget, or the Great One, or Shining One, says Noel. The earth goddess was the shining or brightest deep in all things. I don't know what that is supposed to mean truly, but at least they're giving some context here. This is truly what they believe is that she was a druid, one of the most famous druids, actually. So, Groundhog Day. Who doesn't think really that a groundhog is pretty cute? And we all think it's amazing and it's such a fun kind of silly day. We're going to find out why this matters. And it does come, again, straight from Candlemas, which is the occult. So you have St. Bridget's Day, Candlemas, and Groundhog Day. They all kind of go together. And it says, traditionally, Irish people celebrated the 1st of February as the first day of spring. This comes from the ancient belief that the Celtic goddess of fertility, Bridget, this time with an H in it. I hope you go back through these slides and realize there's Bridget without an H in there, and there's Bridget with an H, and there's Bridget, and so on. You need to see how this Celtic goddess worship works with just a slight change of the spelling usually and stuff. And so they said it would pass through the land, giving blessings to those who felt her tributes and who had the power to change the seasons from frost-bitten winter to the warmth of spring. But another character who was present in the ancient myths of Imbolc was the Cailleach, or witch, who could allow the winter to last for longer. But there's a reason that Groundhog Day lands on February 2nd each year. It's inextricably linked to St. Bridget's Day. Excuse me. I'm going to get some water. Or the ancient Celtic festival Imbolc, which celebrates the goddess Bridget. Since we're going to be talking about this probably last, Imbolc is Easter, just so that you have that connection right now. With this, rather than the Cailleach gathering wood, so this witch, this woman that they're talking about that's a witch, gathering wood for a longer winter, came a new legend, and that is to see a hedgehog on St. Bridget's Day. That to see a hedgehog on St. Bridget's Day was a good weather omen. Because if the hedgehog left the den, it had been sleeping in all winter. It knew that the winter was over and spring was coming. Legend has it that Cailleach would hope that the 1st of February would be bright and sunny, which would wake her up early and allow her to gather enough firewood to keep warm during the long winter which was still to come. If the day was dark and gloomy, the Cailleach would sleep through the day and be unable to gather more firewood, meaning that spring was on its way. It's already possible to see where the Groundhog Day tradition of predicting 6 more weeks of of spring came from. But before Imbolc became Groundhog's Day, it was assimilated into Christianity with Candlemas, which celebrates the purification of the Virgin Mary. So that is truly where it comes from. It was based on an old woman witch that would come out of her house, and if she gathered wood, then they would still have plenty of days of winter ahead of them that she had to gather wood for, to symbolize to everyone that it was still happening. If she didn't come out and she was sleeping through it, then spring was on its way. That was the original groundhog clues, I guess, of spring and winter coming. So next we have, let me go back one real quick. Okay, next we have another Satanic Revels on February 2nd as well, which is listed in this white box down below. It was again sexual, and so many times it did have to be female of a certain age. So they said it's 7 through 17. And oral, anal, and vaginal sex. But as we go further than that, we land on Shrove Tuesday. It's known as many things, so that's why we're getting to it just real quick. Shrovetide, 3 days before Ash Wednesday. And that's why they get tied together, because they are very close together and connected. So Shrove Tuesday, or Mardi Gras, okay, as it is commonly known, literally means Fat Tuesday in French, called Pancake Tuesday in England. I don't know why the pancakes are everywhere, but they are. And is associated with the Roman Catholic Church custom of Lent. The idea behind Mardi Gras or carnival celebrations is that people overindulge before giving up something for Lent, which begins the following day with Ash Wednesday. From Ash Wednesday to Easter, many solemnly mark their foreheads with ashes in the sign of a cross. Fasting or abstaining from certain foods or physical pleasures for 40 days. This is done to supposedly imitate Jesus Christ's 40-day fast in the wilderness, which they claim is from Matthew, described in Matthew 4, verse 1 and 2. According to the Catholic Encyclopedia, however, the real aim of Lent is, above all else, to prepare men for the celebration of the death and resurrection of Christ. And the better the preparation, the more effective the celebration will be. One can effectively relive the mystery only with purified mind and heart. The purpose of Lent is to provide that purification by weaning men from sin and selfishness through self-denial and prayer, by creating in them the desire to do God's will and to make His kingdom come by making it come first of all in their hearts. Interesting. It's coming from the Anglo-Saxon word Lenten. So there you go. It's Anglo-Saxon, by the way. It means spring. Lent originated in the ancient Babylonian mystery religion. They're telling you this. This is incredible. Ancient Babylonian mystery religion, which in the 40 days abstinence of Lent was directly borrowed from the worshippers of the Babylonian goddess. Among the pagans, this Lent seems to have been an indispensable preliminary to the great annual festival in commemoration of the death and resurrection of Tammuz. Wow. Okay, so it is not Christ. It's not at all worshiping Christ. It is Tammuz. It is to memorialize Tammuz. Tammuz was the false messiah of the Babylonians, a satanic counterfeit of Jesus Christ. Many of the cultures had a counterfeit Jesus Christ. Mitra, I guess, is the Roman Catholic one. Attis in other cultures, such as the Roman before that, or Greek, perhaps. Just a lot of them have it. So the Feast of Tammuz was usually celebrated in June, also called the month of Tammuz. This is awesome. Why? Because, again, I don't say this there, but I'm just going to tell you, in the Babylonian calendar, which happens to be the Hebrew calendar, you have the same names of the month exactly. I hope that makes some of you very, very shocked, because it's amazing. It truly is on the Hebrew calendar the same as the Babylonian name Tammuz. Lent was held 40 days before the feast, celebrating by alternate weeping and rejoicing. This is why Lent means spring. It took place from spring to early summer. Those who worshipped the son of the sun god then set aside 40 days of weeping for Tammuz. They celebrated Lent one day for each year of his incarnation, in which they would deny a worldly pleasure for his pleasure in the afterworld. Now I have a Bible verse for these things. See Ezekiel 8, it says. At the beginning, which is where I'm just going to tell you, God specifically had Ezekiel write in there how the women were, Israel, by their abominable ways, the women were weeping for Tammuz in the gates of Israel. And this angered God heavily because it's a pagan practice. So it's mentioned specifically in the Bible as something you're not supposed to do. At the end of the morning such as crying, by the way, if you're just listening to this, on the Sunday after the spring equinox, Tammuz would come back to life and the agriculture would flourish and the animals became fertile. The 40-day mourning and penance had to end on a Sunday after the first full moon, after March 21st, to coincide with the worship of Easter, the goddess of fertility. So they did all kinds of gymnastics with the date to make it coincide with Easter, so that you could say that basically the worship of the weeping for Tammuz and everything would coincide with Easter, but that you could call it a Christian thing instead of a pagan thing. The mystic Tau, which is the T on the forehead, the initial of Tammuz's name was written in Egyptian hieroglyphics and in the old Wamitic languages as representing the cross. I don't know if you know this either, but the cross is actually a pagan symbol. It does mean Tammuz. And I believe there's a reason Jesus was persecuted and killed on a cross, because he was overcoming even the worship of Tammuz. He was showing that he was above Baal worship or Tammuz worship. You can go back and see that connection in the Baal worship one, which is called Who is the Rain Man? Please go watch that if you don't know that connection. But yes, the cross was meant to show that you were you're being put in subjection to the rules and judicial system of Tammuz. And so when you were punished on it, you were a criminal and so on, and you were going to be justly punished by the God and feel his wrath. And so because Jesus rose again, he showed that he was bigger than that. He was the Almighty God, and he could overcome even that God's punishment and ways. This mark of Tammuz was depicted on the forehead of Aphrodite, which is known as Semiramis, the mother of Tammuz. Tertullian from 250 says, in all our travels and movements, in all our coming in and going out, in putting on our shoes at the bath, at the table, in lighting our candles, in lying down, in sitting down, whatever employment occupies us, we mark our foreheads with the sign of the cross. The mystic Tau was marked in baptism on the foreheads of those initiated into the mysteries, he says. Now, this is very interesting that he says mysteries, because the only church, I'll broaden that. The only word that uses really the mysteries is the Babylonians, if you really want to start way back in time, the Freemasons, the Satanists, the occult, all the stuff you don't want to be a part of if you really want to worship God. And so God doesn't speak in mysteries or keep secrets from people. And so I've also read many other things, and it says not just the mysteries, but it was of the initiates of Tammuz, that each initiate would get a T on their head, and that is what Ash Wednesday is. So that incomplete wholeness is what truly Lent, Shrovetide, and Ash Wednesday is about. There's more to this. It says, similarly, the Catholic Fat Tuesday, otherwise known as Mardi Gras, is rooted in the pre-Christian Roman celebration of Lupercalia. Lupercalia, as I've said, you can just get a clue right down below here, is Valentine's Day. So we're not there yet. Don't jump down to there fully, but we're going to go straight back up to the top again. A February holiday honoring the Roman god of fertility is what Lupercalia is. Its customs involved feasting, drinking, and carnal behavior. Today, the same can be said of Mardi Gras, when Catholics, as well as non-Catholics, eat festival foods and party before abstaining for 40 days during Lent. The spring equinox was recognized by various pagan cults as a festival marking the resurrection of light, triumphing over darkness, and the fresh fecundity of the land, or fertility of the land. Okay, so they're telling you right away, this is not at all, again, Christian. It's pagans, based on various pagan cults, festivals. Good Friday, or Fish Fry Friday, as we usually have known in the Catholic Church, honors the fish god Dagon. Palm Sunday is traditionally a Christian, quote-unquote Christian, again, that means it's Catholic, holiday, though it has some roots in paganism. Much of Christian tradition arose from the Greek-Roman culture. I'm glad they're telling the truth there, because if you get anything from ever being just confused by a lot of things that the Catholic Church does, basically it's from a Greek and Roman mishmash of mythology and gods. Truly, that's where it's coming from. Okay, so it arose from the Greek and Roman culture, in which the palm branch was a symbol of triumph and victory, peace and eternal life. The palm was also a symbol of eternal life in ancient Egypt, where palm tree worship was practiced. So Palm Sunday, they're telling us, is directly related to the Egyptians' worship of palm trees. I hope you know that now, but tree worship, why? I don't understand why, but okay. So, Lupercalia, now we jump down to that. In ancient Rome, by the way, this picture on the side here of this wolf, 2 human children are underneath her, suckling her breasts. This is Lupercalia, which is very, very awkward. But here's an interesting thing to note. On Valentine's Day, or aka Lupercalia, it is actually the colors that I have there. It's from the Church of Satan. They religiously keep Lupercalia Day. I hope you know that. And they will not miss one of those days. It is also overlapping with the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits. Okay, that's not a good sign. Just thought that would be an important note. But it says, in ancient Rome, February 15th marked the traditional festival of Lupercalia, which was an observance of fertility and the coming of spring. Lupercalia was a major festival on the Roman calendar and was commemorated every year on February 15th. It was held in honor of the gods Faunus and Lupercus, the gods of agriculture and fertility. It also honored the mythological founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus. Again, if you're all into witchcraft and everything, Satanism, Jesuitism, okay, the Church of Satan, those are the people that are really strict about keeping this. Why would everything point back to the Church of Rome again? Or the founders of Rome? Why all of this? Just ask yourself that. Lupercalia was considered an important holiday of religious observance and purification. In the morning, the priests of Lupercus, known as Luperci, gathered at Lupercal Cave. Leprechauns. That just hit me. Why do we have leprechauns? It sounds so much like Lupercal. I'm not saying there's a connection. I have never seen a connection yet with that, but it's interesting nonetheless. Anyway, back to Lupercal Cave, the place where Romulus and Remus were said to have been cared for as babies by a she-wolf, Lupercus, named Lupercus. The cave lay at the foot of Palatine Hill, the spot at which the brothers were believed to have founded Rome. With the sacrificial blood wiped across their foreheads, the youth partaking in this ceremony would then run the circumference of the Palatine Hill, perhaps about a 5K, tracing the traditional route of the city boundaries that were traced by Romulus the day he founded Rome. In a representation of fertility, and because Lupercus was a god of shepherds, 2 male goats were sacrificed in the cave. This was followed by the sacrifice of a dog to represent purification, and because dogs often guard the flocks. Blood taken from the sacrificial knife was then smeared across the foreheads. Of the 2 naked Luperci. So now they're finally telling you there were only 2 Luperci that were kind of priests of Lupercus that were blessed and had to do these rituals to honor him. And what did they say next? Let's see. The knife was then wiped clean with a piece of milk-soaked wool. Historians have suggested this ritual is a reason why Valentine's Day is associated with the colors red and white. Red represents the blood from the sacrifice, while white represents the milk on the wool that wipes the knife clean, signifying new life. Feasting followed this ritual, and after stomachs were full, the Luperci cut strips from the sacrificed goats, called thongs, and dipped them in the sacrificial blood. The Luperci then ran naked through the streets of Rome and whipped any woman within striking distance. Many welcomed the lashings. How strange is that? They welcomed such whippings, basically, often revealing bare skin for the whips to strike them. The Romans believed that the whips beside it would make childless women more fertile, while blessing pregnant women with the gift of an easy birth. The Lupercal was situated in the foot of the Palatine Hill, and beside it grew one of the wild fig trees considered sacred to Romulus and Rome. So now we have the fig tree being worshipped and sacred to them for another reason. The fig tree with its pendulous testicle-shaped fruit and milky sap, so there you go, that's why it's important to them, was considered an aphrodisiac and a fertility booster for men, and was often called the goat fig for its association with Pan, bestiality, and male potency. The Lupercal was also flanked by a shrine to Rumina, the goddess of breastfeeding, a reminder that a mother's milk of any species is crucial to the survival of Rome. Crucial to the survival of Rome. Interesting. A time known by Wiccans and occults for sex magic rituals. I'm glad they're being honest. They're just laying everything out there. None of this is ever what I've written. It is, quite honestly, word for word what I've usually found, pasted together and given, usually very tiny. I give the resources and websites where I got it from because I don't have room. But at least it's there. You can always zoom up on it. So another custom during Lupercalia was the pairing of young Roman boys and girls. At one point during the festival, the name of young girls were written on bits of paper and slipped into a jar. Every young man would then pull out a girl's name from the jar. The pair would then be coupled together for the duration of Lupercalia. Many stayed together until the following year's festival. Some even fell in love and were married. Now, this is from an occult kind of blog, so they're talking about how amazing this can be for finding the love of your life. Unfortunately, we know that when you're paired together like that and you don't know the person, a lot of it could be bad, it could be good. But especially because this is all about fertility and sex again, this is not a good thing to be pairing your daughter or girls with men and boys just to be taken advantage of, basically. But this is where we get Valentine's cards. This is why we give Valentine's cards. You're being paired with someone, and this whole idea of being in love came from this pairing of girls and boys and having your names written on paper. So then we go to, let me make sure I got that. Okay. Now we're in March, and the next big thing that happens is a occult holiday. By the way, there's a lot of different ranges of time in the calendar, which there aren't certain things. And so it does jump like that. And so, yeah, the next one is in March, on March 15th and 17th, which is called the Ides or Ides of March. They still call it that sometimes in England or other places of Europe, which gives credence to this. It says, originally the Ides were supposed to be determined by the full moon, reflecting the lunar origin of the Roman calendar. In the earliest calendar, the Ides of March would have been the first full moon of the new year. The Ides of each month were sacred to Jupiter. So here we go, the idea of a monthly keeping of this Ides, similar to another holiday we saw, to Jupiter was also a thing. Jupiter is the Romans' supreme deity. The Flamindialis, maybe, I don't know, Jupiter's high priest, led the Ides sheep in procession along the Via Sacra to the Arx, where it was sacrificed. In addition to the monthly sacrifice, so they had a monthly sacrifice, they say, now they have a second sacrifice. The Ides of March was also the occasion of the feast of Anna Purina, the goddess of the year, whose festival originally concluded the ceremonies of a new year. The day was enthusiastically celebrated among the common people with picnics, drinking, and revelry. One source from late antiquity also places the Mammoralia on the Ides of March. This perhaps driving him, this observance, which has aspects of scapegoat or ancient Greek pharmakos ritual, involving beating an old man dressed in animal skins. Why would you ever beat an old man? And why did they do this? I guess we're going to find out. And in perhaps driving him from the city, the ritual may have been a New Year festival representing the expulsion of the old year. So you're just trying to get him to run, to make the old year flee. In the later imperial period, the Ides began a holy week of festivals celebrating Cybele and Attis. Now they're being very honest where this actually comes from. It comes from the worship of the gods Cybele and Attis. Being the day that Canna Intrat goddess, oh my goodness, the reed enters, reed meaning like a reed of, from the water. When Attis was born and found among the reeds of a Phrygian river. Phrygian. Most of the time we see a Phrygian hat, which is a cap kind of like the Smurfs, and we have Snow White's were they're not elves. They dwarfs, thank you. Dwarfs that wore that hat all the time. And really that goes back to the Phrygian goddess again, over and over again. And the Freemasons, who were also known for wearing the Phrygian cap. And so it's always giving credence to the occult, which is so, again, this isn't a cult holiday, so I guess I understand. But it's supposedly to the god Attis, who was found in the Phrygian River. But we find that on our dollar. We find it on seals for the state and the government all the time, this Phrygian hat. So just keep that in mind. It's interesting. They're kind of weaving their own web of understanding if you understand all this. So being an old man, okay, that's not right. Celebrating Cybele and Attis, but being the day Canna Intrata, that's not where it was. He was discovered, oh, here we go. He was discovered by shepherds, or the goddess Cybele, who was also known as the Magna Mater. This is amazing because every time they say that, it means the Great Mother. So always think of Mary or Mother Universe. You need to make those connections because these are all the different names that they're truly giving throughout history, throughout different cultures, that is counterfeit all the time of a Christian. We're not to worship Mary either. It never tells us to ever worship Jesus' mother. So they have these reasons why it's always a goddess. It's always a god they're worshiping. Okay, he was discovered by her, who was also known as Magna Mater, or the Great Mother. A week later, on the 22nd of March, the solemn commemoration of Arbor Intrat, or the tree enters. We have Arbor Day. I hope that makes sense. The arbor enters. It means the tree enters. Commemorating the death of Attis under a pine tree. A college of priests called the Dendroboroi, or tree bearers, annually cut down a tree, hung from it an image of Attis, and carried it to the temple of the Magna Mater with lamentation, or just celebrating. The day was formalized as part of the official Roman calendar under Claudius in 54 AD. A 3-day period of mourning followed, culminating with celebrating the rebirth of Attis on the 25th of March, the date of the vernal equinox on the Julian calendar. This is also known as, well, I'm wrong. I actually need to take 2 steps back. So there's the full definition of the Ides of March and why they existed and how they're truly pagan. But when we go to the the satanic calendar here at the very bottom in white again, we jumped over the fact that the names are so common. You have the Ides or Ides of March with either an E or an I, it doesn't matter. But it also coincides with a few days before it, March 1st, on the satanic holiday here, which is called Saint Icastad. I know it doesn't sound like it sounds similar, but it does seem similar, which is supposed to be a time when they do a blood sacrifice of drinking human blood for strength and homage to the demons. And it can be a victim of any age, male or female. On March 20th, the date can vary somewhat for the spring equinox. You have what they call a Sabbath or Sabbat festival. Yes, Wiccans have Sabbaths as well. They have 8 of them throughout the year. It is their holidays, and it is Easter. That is interesting. It is Easter. It is Halloween. It is many of the occult holidays. And it's a major fertility Sabbath or Sabbat, they say right there, which means that it's for orgies. This is an orgy day. Of course, any type of sex goes, any age, human, female, human, or animal. So I just give that all to you because I need to be upfront. I need you, again, to see the truly disgusting nature of where all of these holidays come from and really where it circles around over and over again to these things. So that's those other dates that are needed to be mentioned. In between there, we have the March 29th. I read that wrong. March 19th, which is St. Joseph's Day. Oh, that's where it comes from. St. Joseph's Day is also known, quite honestly, sometimes as St. Einstad, or whatever, however you say it, which is the blood sacrifice day. So there's the overlap that's kept by the Archdiocese and the Jesuits. So all those holidays are packed together and they overlap with one another. We go to St. Patrick's Day, which, of course, if you know, I didn't give it, I guess, but St. Patrick, who made all the Irish, became, oh my goodness. So this is the true definition here. I'm shocked at hearing this. It is said that he made all the Irish using a shamrock in 400 CE. So we are told. We are told that he was taken into slavery at 16 years of age and sold into Ireland, where he worked as a shepherder for 6 years, but sheep did not exist back then. How do you get that? I don't know. So he would have been a goat herder. Oh, here we go. It was during his time as a slave sheep or goat minder they call it, or herder, that he began to have religious visions. These visions reinforced, so we are told, his Catholic faith. During one of these visions, he heard voices, that told him where he would find a getaway ship. He escaped, went to France, where he became a priest, and later on returned to France to become a bishop. Why would you again lift up somebody who is Catholic over and over again? It's always a bishop or an archbishop or a priest or something. He also burned many Druid books, if his confessions are to be believed. 150 Druid books were burned, and on Tara, he caused a competition with a Druid book and the Bible to be thrown into a barrel of water. Needless to say, the Druid book sank, proving that the Bible was a better book. But hang on, we are repeatedly told that the Druids did not have books. They did. They do have books. He also prayed for an old Druid to die, and we are told that Arch-Druid named Locru was lifted up high in the air, but Patrick knelt in prayer, and the Druid fell and was dashed in pieces upon a rock. So levitation, he was levitating, basically. St. Patrick is said to have caused the murder of almost 800 Druids, the take of a she-beast called Caoranach that he banished to an island. The pilgrimage today to the retreat center on Loudurg is a trick for the followers of this St. Patrick religion because it is on the wrong island. Okay, I don't know what they're really talking about fully, but the pagan cave temple on the island that the Catholic Church tried to use was not hospitable to them, So they moved their purgatory to another island in the same lake and achieved some commercial access for a while. There is a story about Patrick and two pagan Celtic princesses. And so there, within sight of the palace of Cuachan, Patrick baptized them with the waters of the well of Cleabach. These two priestesses, I'm not going to attempt to say their name, remained for a while on their knees, deep in prayer. A rough stone altar was made ready, and Patrick prepared to say Mass. Before the Mass began, the two girls came forward saying, "We wish to consecrate ourselves as spouses of Christ." Patrick received their vows and placed over them the veil, the first consecrated virgins in Ireland. Then they wished to see the face of Christ, but Patrick replied, "You cannot do that until you have tasted the sacrifice and passed through the door of death." But they said, "We desire these things." Patrick offered the sacrifice and gave them the Holy Eucharist. Then he closed their eyes and they died. And then this person writes, "Oh, come on. Why would two pagan princesses study at a Druid school under royal patronage suddenly want to be spouses or wives of Christ? Why are we told that these two female Druids became nuns who were automatically brides of Christ in a polygamous marriage to the one true God?" So this is the actual occult story of St. Patrick. I know if you look deeper into usually from a Christian source, it'll tell you that he was a really great guy who might have even kept the Sabbath, and he was a slave who tended sheep and he did escape and so on, but that we are keeping his memory alive and keeping that celebration because he was a great Christian. Not so, but at the same time, whatever religion he was practicing is clearly being lifted up and memorialized as something on a calendar because usually it's just because it has been deemed worthy of such because of its mythological and God-worshipping qualities by the Catholic Church or the Pope. So that's interesting. I don't know that most people know that story, but that's where you get it from. And his connection with the Druids over and over again and stuff already tells you that he was not in the clear. He was not a true Christian, and Christian meaning when I say that he was a true follower of Christ, I believe. St. Joseph's Day. I had mentioned that on March 19th. We have to read about this because I didn't know about it much. One of the oldest popular traditions in Sicily is St. Joseph's Day, whose celebrations take place on March 19th. Sacred and profane mix together during this day because it's surely a moment of deep devotion and homage to St. Joseph. But it's also a folklorish feast rich in traditions and joyful moments. Okay. Although it is also celebrated during or throughout Italy, this day has a special meaning for Sicilians. Sicily, like people from Sicily. According to legend, during the Middle Ages, Sicily was affected by a terrible drought and famine. Many people died of starvation, and Sicilians started praying and begging St. Joseph, promising him to celebrate his day with the St. Joseph's table, an altar with special foods, flowers, and devotional objects as their thanksgiving for his great miracle. So if he would do a miracle for them, they would always put up an altar and worship him on that day. Fathers and men who care for children, workers, immigrants, prayed for employment, real estate. Most famously, his statue is buried upside down when selling a house. Again, it's also used against doubt and for a happy death. Modern associations with labor rights. Oh, it was associated with labor rights. Many Italian-American societies dedicated to the saints began as mutual benefit societal groups of workers who would pool their resources to take care of each other's families in case of injury or death. Okay. But if you've ever wondered where labor rights come from, I guess we know now. Some of the most famous altars dedicated to Saint Joseph are found in Salemi. I hope that's not salami or something. Sicily. Men and women spend 5 days a week. Wow, 5 days a week. For a whole month building these ornate altars. The men build the frames and cover them in lush vegetation, including seasonal flowers and citrus fruits. The women bake breads in special shapes. All of the gold you see in the picture below, we'll see it later, is bread. It's truly breathtaking. St. Joseph's altars typically have 3 levels, representing either the persons of the Holy Trinity or the Holy Family, depending on who you ask. The large breads in the center are dedicated to the Madonna, baby Jesus, and St. Joseph. So they're bringing in other gods, and St. Joseph, if it's, I guess, Mother Mary and Joseph, like Mary and Joseph, Jesus's parents, again, we weren't told to worship Joseph, the father of Jesus. So ancestor worship is really what they're promoting over and over again here. As Christianity spread, we can easily imagine the local people moving their worship of the mother goddess into hiding. Later on, these statues were miraculously rediscovered and reintroduced into Catholic society as Madonna. So I'm glad that they're actually saying that this is not Mother Mary, it's Madonna. It is a pagan god they're saying is Mother Mary. From the cult of Mary, so they actually know it's the cult of Mary. The fact that many of them were found hidden in trees and underground caves points to their pagan origins as mother goddess figures. They are also often kept in crypts near sacred springs and wells. Whether this is intentional or not, no one but the Vatican knows. Ooh, so they're throwing that in the mix. Only the Vatican knows. That implies that in all of history, or at least in this historical understanding, but I actually know that most of history is actually not accurate. The Vatican goes in and they change the history that's going to be reported in your history books, what's taught in schools, what is going to be reported on the news, all these things to be what they want it to be, so that it venerates, meaning celebrates and worships either these quote-unquote saints or ancestors or Freemasons or other occult members or other bishops and priests, or a day that was worshipped for a different god or goddess. And so I just think it's incredible that they're mentioning this. Such as the Black Madonna or Chartreuse, who was unfortunately restored and repainted to a white color in 2009. So that's what the Vatican did with all of these Black Madonnas. They changed it. So bread, songs, and prayers on that day is what would be known. Also a tupa tupa skit. A tupa tupa is where 3 kids play the part of Jesus, Joseph, and Mary when looking for the inn. They are turned away by the first 2 houses, but the third they are welcomed in. Inside of this house, an altar to Saint Joseph has been prepared. The children are served a taste of every dish that has been prepared and left out on the altar. Once they have sampled each dish, the rest of the guests can enjoy the meal. This ritual reflects a belief common to many religious traditions in the Mediterranean world, which is that hospitality must be shared with strangers who may very well be spirits, gods, or angels in disguise. We are told that is true. We should offer to help other human beings because they may be angels in disguise. However, again, this whole ritual, first of all, when they were trying to find an inn, one of them plays the part of Jesus, Joseph, and Mary. But when biblical account actually takes place, when you read your Bible, you'll read they're trying to find an inn for Jesus to be born in. So this story is already showing that Jesus was present. He wasn't. And just why would you worship Saint Joseph? Again, we're not told anywhere to do that. So here's some pictures of what the Black Madonna or the White Madonna, that's actually, if you go back far enough, you'll find that Madonna is the same as Isis, nursing Horus, as I have noted there. It says images of the matris, or mother goddess, bearing a child has sometimes been taken for those of the Virgin, when found accidentally, and as they are of wood blackened with age, they are known as Virgus Noris and occupy an honored place in Christian sanctuaries. Many churches of Notre Dame have been built on sites where an image of the Virgin is said to have been miraculously found. The image probably being that of a pagan mother, so they know that it's not the Virgin Mary, it is a different pagan goddess. This is an excerpt from that book, The Religion of the Ancient Celts. It says the miraculous qualities of these figures lends even further credence to the idea that they are incarnations of earlier goddesses. Many of them are associated with fertility and perform miracles around childbirth. La Moreneta, the Black Madonna and patroness of Catalonia, is believed to be in charge of all things involving sexuality, fertility, childbirth, and marriage. An old saying from the religious region states that he is not well wed who has not taken his wife to Montserrat. I guess to see that site and give praise or worship or sacrifice to her. Many other Black virgins are also linked to those women's mysteries, hence the massive cults that sprung up around their shrines. When one takes into consideration that goddesses such as Isis, Artemis, and Inanna were also known to oversee the same realms, the true identity of the figure is revealed. So I'm really glad they're directly tying that connection. But Isis and Artemis and Inanna are also known as Semiramis, which is Nimrod's wife and mother. He actually married his own mother and made her his wife. And then this was the beginning of Baal worship, so we know it's that. Okay. These are these altars that they've been talking about. I hope you can see that. Like they said, all the gold in the one to the left is it's all bread that have been baked very ornately. But you do see tons of symbols. I hope that you've seen one on that particular altar there, very top, with IHS on it. IHS is not usually known either for being Christian. It's Isis, Horus, Seb, or Set, as there was the Egyptian gods that were all named that, and you could either be Set or Seb. The second one here is a cup. This whole idea of a cup ties to a lot of Wiccan ceremonies where when they're about to impregnate and rape a girl, just as they mentioned in St. Bridget's Day, they would lay the girl down and either put a phallic symbol over them upwards where it would actually go, but lay it there. Or in the Wiccan tradition today, when they do the hierogamos ritual, as they did a lot of the time to make people supposedly transition to androgyny, which you can go watch all about in my androgyny episode. You didn't even have to participate necessarily in the sexual act. You could seriously just put a knife into water, symbolizing the cup as the, vaginal area open, and the knife as the phallic going in. That it had been carried out, and that you had been consecrated to I guess, Satan and your vow to become androgynous. And there were a lot of other ways that there was one other way that I heard of that you can do that, but it's with a cup. So I'm interested sometimes when I see that cup and how they've even made it the Holy Grail, such as Indiana Jones and stuff. There's also, what do we have here? On that other altar, there are, I don't know if you noticed, little eggs, but that's interesting. I guess that's really all that's hugely important to me in that picture. Okay, so now we get to Easter. This is our last and final stop that we're going to make at this holiday before we have basically part 2 of the holiday deep dive that will come next. I spend a lot of time on Easter just because a lot of people have questions about this. There's a lot more to it that people don't quite understand. And so I hope this helps. Easter was actually kept. It could be kept all the way through March 20th through the 23rd. Also known as the 16-year-old Bride of Christ ritual for satanic rebels. So this is where the Bride of Christ again comes up. It was, as I mentioned before, it is where many of the young girls would devote their life to Christ by becoming a nun, and that really meant that they were just going to be kind of game for the priests to use sexually to breed more babies for sacrifice in other rituals. So becoming the bride of Christ, it may be a beautiful thing in the Bible, but the Catholic Church has totally changed that meaning into something else. And like I'd mentioned before, many nuns will give their testimony and in documentaries, and they'll talk about how much abuse they went through. Conceiving children and being abused sexually and so on. Just even humiliation techniques and so on that they went through being a nun, and how the order of Catholicism and nunnery, whatever you want to call it, is not really godly at all. So Easter is also known as Ishtar or Oestra, goddess of the dawn. That tells us a lot. And actually, I recently just found something out reading the Bible and reading about Lucifer, Satan, all these things. He was also known as, I hope I say this right, something of the dawn. Maybe I'll have to add that in later. But he is actually known as being at dawn. So it's kind of like he's the counterfeit. He's a true source of worshiping. What?
Son of the morning.
Son
Venus.
of the morning. And what?
Venus.
And Venus.
Morning star.
Yeah. So he is known as that. It's a nod back to him. But this is what would happen. The Saturnalia, it comes from Saturnalia again, originated at the birth date of Tammuz, the bastard son of Semiramis, the widow of Nimrod, of biblical evil fame. So they're putting it directly where the origin starts. After Shem cut Nimrod, this is Shem from the Bible. Good guy. Noah's son who stayed faithful to him, and then as he saw his nephew, it would be his nephew then, or perhaps great nephew, Nimrod, become evil and create Baal worship, he decided he was going to kill Nimrod. So he did, and it was right that he did so. He was blessed by God for doing so. So he cut Nimrod into pieces, and Babylonian legend insists that he ascended into the heavens and became the sun god himself. So this is when, let me clarify, this is Nimrod, that he supposedly ascended and became a god when that happened. The rays of the sun implanted the seed into his widow, and presto, she was pregnant. The son of the sun god was miraculously conceived, as was the adoration of the mother and child cult evident in every culture on earth today. That is the truth. This is truly where that all comes from. And no matter what it's called in every mythology and every culture, it is truly from Nimrod and Semiramis and their son Tammuz that we get the Trinity and the mother-child cult that happens everywhere. On the winter solstice, Tammuz was born, they say, as were most of the traditions surrounding the child mass. This is in quotations as well. So they actually had a season of child mass, which is really, it's going to be sad. Tammuz, the reincarnation of the sun god. Nimrod was killed in a hunting accident when he was gored to death by a wild boar in his 40th year. Those who worshipped the son of the sun god then set aside 40 days of weeping for Tammuz. They celebrated Lent, 1 day for each year of his incarnation, in which they would deny a worldly pleasure for his pleasure in the afterworld. Like I said, Ezekiel 8, it's directly from the same area, says that this was an ungodly practice of the pagan women to weep for Tammuz. That is what Lent is. That is why they did it, because Tammuz was their god. The eggs in rabbits that many of us have always wondered from childhood, why on earth do they have a connection to Easter? They shouldn't, but here is the supposed connection. After many years, his mother Semiramis died. The gods looked favorably on the mother of God and sent her back to earth as a spring fertility goddess, always depicted as an exaggeratedly endowed, bare-breasted queen of sexual desire. Semiramis, the queen of heaven, was born again as the goddess Easter, or Astarte, as she emerged from a giant egg that landed in the Euphrates River at sunrise on the Sunday. Okay. On the Sunday after the vernal equinox, to proclaim her divine authority, she changed a bird into an egg-laying rabbit. As the cult developed, the priests of Easter would impregnate young virgins on the altar of the goddess of fertility at sunrise on Easter Sunday. 9 months to a year later, these same priests of Easter, or Ishtar, would sacrifice those 3-month-old babies on the altar at the front of the sanctuary and dye Easter eggs in the blood of the sacrificed infants. This is why, personally, I have never and will never color or dye an egg. As it was used, you would take an egg and dye it in the blood of these children sacrificed to Ishtar or Easter. Why would we want to be perpetuating that? Why would we want to be a part of it? And you also kept it for the blood that was on it to symbolize fertility for the next year and remember your child that you had lost while worshiping this goddess. None of it's good. So there's that answer. The Queen of Heaven as well was mentioned in here. The Queen of Heaven is mentioned by name in the Bible as well. I have many, many connections with that. Actually, I mentioned it the most in the androgyny episode or show. So please go back and watch that if you want more information on her. So let's see here. I'm going to fill in one of the other disgusting details is that she supposedly, when she changed that bird into an egg-laying rabbit, was said to have fallen in love with that rabbit and had sexual intercourse with the animal. So bestiality is a part of this also. Okay, so the 40 days of Lent, or weeping for Tammuz, starts the Easter fertility season. So that's how we know that it's coming. The festivities culminate on Easter Sunday, where the priests of Easter slaughter the wild boar in honor of the boar that killed Tammuz, and the entire congregation will eat the ham of it on Easter Sunday. This comes from a certain book that I have listed there. Easter always occurs on the first Sunday after the Paschal full moon. This is the first full moon that occurs after the vernal equinox, which signifies the beginning of spring in the northern hemisphere, according to the Old Farmer's Almanac. So it is without fail always on the first Sunday after the Paschal full moon. Do you know what Paschal means? This is the, oh my goodness, why can't I think of it? This is when the disciples all received the Holy Spirit, the Pentecost. Thank you. So Pentecost. We're also not told to worship Pentecost. Never has been mentioned to do so, but they again try to make this a Christian holiday by saying, that it basically intertwines with Pentecost and Jesus' resurrection and all that, but it all has to do with worshiping this God that was reincarnated and the sexual fertility cults. So, Easter always, I already read that, sorry. The Yezidis, or devil worshippers of Kurdistan, hold a 40-day spring fast. This comes from the book Layard's Babylon and Nineveh. So he actually did research on all this and how they used to do this in Babylon and Nineveh. It was held in Rome to commemorate the sorrows of Ceres. In the early 19th century, German explorer Alexander von Humboldt noted the practice among the pagans in Mexico being held in spring. His account states 3 days after the vernal equinox began a solemn fast of 40 days in honor of the sun, S-U-N. A Lent of 40 days was also commemorated in Egypt. According to English scholar John Landseer in his Sabian Researches, an Egyptian Lent of 40 days was held in honor of Adonis or Osiris. It doesn't matter what god it changed from one culture to the next. It was Adonis and Osiris now, then it changed to, I guess, worship of Easter, Ishtar. It just changed names as the time went on, but it's still the same thing. So as we see here, when did this become a Christian holiday? That's the question I'm asking. And it says in 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea, Constantine met to make Easter a Christian holiday, mandating the uniform observance of the date of Easter. So he just made it mandatory. You had no choice. Is supposed to represent Jesus rising from the dead. So this is where we truly get it. The question is asked, is Easter pagan? The holiday's origins and history, from the Crosswalk. I'm not sure if that's a Christian source or not now, but it says one principal objection to this feast is the name Easter. It is often said that this name is a thinly veiled pagan name drawn from the Babylonian fertility goddess Ishtar, also known as Astarte or Ashtoreth, in other pagan cultures encountered by the Israelites in biblical times. The very one that was always told, they were always told to avoid and not get involved in the sexual practices of. That they looked upon these rites as they went into the cities of these pagan cultures, and they were captivated and they fell for it. They got involved in these pagan things and they hurt God's heart a lot by doing so and were led astray. So we know over and over again throughout the Bible that it's a very God is, there's not just one, there's several, by the way, because God is trying to warn us of all these other gods, that nothing new is under the sun. All these gods existed in ancient biblical times, and now they're coming to the forefront under different names in different ways. Pretty much, they're the same. And so we're just not to have anything to do with them. The second part says, these names are certainly similar to the name Easter. However, as I noted in other articles, the name Easter is only known from one single historical source, written by the Venerable J.B.T, an 8th century English Christian monk. Okay, that's quite a mouthful. J.B.T briefly identifies the name as referring to a pagan goddess that formerly had a feast at the similar time, and that the old name was used to celebrate the new Christian feast. So he actually is showing us how this was a pagan feast that all of a sudden somehow became godly or quote unquote Christian. It was then worshipped. There was a change. There was obviously this change that was not Right, it was deceptive. This is from a Wiccan site, usually telling others how to worship Ostara on Easter, which is the goddess name as well. And they also give a backstory on the history. It says the goddess Ostara and the origin of the Easter Bunny, a modern neo-pagan tale. Ostara, the goddess of dawn, which is a literal translation apparently in the Saxon, who was responsible for bringing spring each year, was feeling guilty about arriving so late. To make matters worse, she arrived to find a pitiful little bird who lay dying, his wings frozen by the snow. Lovingly, Ostara cradled the shivering creature and saved his life. Legend has it that she then made him her pet, or in the X-rated version, her lover, filled with compassion for him since he could no longer fly because of his frost-damaged wings. The goddess Ostara turned him into a rabbit, a snow hare, and gave him the name Lepus. She also gave him the gift of being able to run with astonishing speed so he could easily evade all the hunters. To honor his early form as a bird, she also gave him the ability to lay eggs in the colors of the rainbow. No less, but he was also allowed to lay eggs on one day out of each year. Eventually, Ostara lost her temper with Lepus, some say, because he was involved with another woman. And she flung him into the skies where he would remain for eternity as the constellation Lepus, or the hare, forever positioned under the feet of the constellation Orion. But later, remembering all the good times they had once enjoyed, Ostara softened a bit and allowed the hare to return to the earth once each year, but only to give away his eggs to the children attending Ostara festivals that were held each spring. Again, there is no historical documentation or lore that states this, and I really have no idea where the tale originated from, this woman says. This is another thing I looked up, and like I was mentioning, dawn's first light is the best time that they say from this occult source to invoke Ostara. So like I said, Satan is known for being something at dawn, and so is this goddess, Ostara, Astarte, Ishtar, whatever, is Easter. It says, as Ostara is goddess of the dawn, we can understand why sunrise services have always been an important aspect of the spring resurrection or rebirth observances of other cultures. Eggs and rabbits are sacred to her, as is the full moon, though there is no historical record of this, since the ancients saw in its markings the image of a rabbit or the hare. Pagan Anglo-Saxons made offerings of colored eggs to her at the vernal equinox. They placed them at graves especially, probably as a charm of rebirth. Egyptians and Greeks were also known to place eggs at grave sites. The goddess of fertility was also the goddess of grain, so offerings of bread and cakes were also made to her. Rabbits are sacred to Ostara, especially white ones, and she was said to be able to take the form of a rabbit herself. Modern pagans celebrate her festival on the vernal equinox. We can see all the overlap, the cakes and breads. Again, the Bible mentions directly not to offer cakes and those who bake cakes to the Queen of Heaven and so on. They're mentioning this God directly not to worship. And all the ties that they're showing directly of going back to Egyptian and Greek times and the Wiccan connection here. So, just a few other things that I wanted to directly show about Easter. It says, spring is in the air. Flowers and bunnies decorate the home. Father helps the children paint beautiful designs on eggs dyed in various colors. These eggs, which will be later hidden and searched for, are placed into lovely seasonal baskets. The wonderful aroma of the hot cross buns that mother's baking in the oven waft through the house. 40 days of abstaining from special foods will finally end the next day. The whole family picks out their Sunday best to wear to the next morning's sunrise worship service to celebrate the Savior's resurrection and the renewal of life. Everyone looks forward to a succulent ham with all the trimmings. It will be a thrilling day. After all, it is one of the most important religious days of the year. Easter, right? No. This is a description of an ancient Babylonian family 2,000 years before Christ, honoring the resurrection of their god, Tammuz, who was brought back from the underworld by his mother or wife, Ishtar, after whom the festival was named. As Ishtar was actually pronounced Easter in most Semitic dialects or Christian, that is actually the children of Israel were Semites. They were known, like Joseph was known as a Semite slave. Semitic means that you are of Hebrew lineage, and you actually have the lineage of Abraham and all these things within you. Basically, you did believe and worship the true God, Jesus Christ. So that's where that name comes from. It could be said that the event portrayed here, in essence, Easter, is Easter. Of course, the occasion could easily have been a Phrygian family honoring Attis and Cybele, or perhaps a Phoenician family worshiping Adonis and Astarte. I'm really grateful that they made those connections, because it was great that they were able to delineate where in different regions of the world you would actually find it and what it would be called. So they say also fitting the description well would be a heretic Israelite family honoring the Canaanite Baal and Ashtoreth. So Israelites alone were not known to be those of God. They, especially if they fell from worshiping the true God, they would be doing this as well, unfortunately. It further says, or this depiction could just as easily represent any number of other immortal pagan fertility celebrations of death and resurrection, including the modern Easter celebration as it has come to us through the Anglo-Saxon fertility rites of the Easter, the goddess Ostara, or Ostara with an E. These are all the same festivals, separated only by time and culture. Easter, the name Easter comes to us from Oestra or Ostara, the Anglo-Saxon goddess of spring, for whom a spring festival was held annually, as it is from the pagan festival that some of our Easter customs have come. In Babylonia, the goddess of spring was called Ishtar. She was identified with the planet Venus, which because... Venus was known as the goddess of dawn. Oh, wow.
Someone said Lucifer is bringer of the dawn.
That's right. Thank you for that. Whoever said that. That's amazing connection right there. I guess that was the Holy Spirit. Okay, back to Venus. Which, because it rises before the sun or sets after it, appears to love the light, which means Venus loves the sun god. In Phoenicia, she becomes Astarte. In Greek, Oestra, related to the Greek word oes, or dawn. And in Germany, Ostara, this comes from the Greek word ost, which means east, which is the direction of the dawn. Oh, we have sun worship again. We have so many levels of sun worship. As we have seen, many names are interchangeable for the more well-known Easter. Pagans typically used many different names for the same god or goddess. Nimrod, the Bible figure who built the city of Babylon, is an example. He was worshipped as Saturn, Vulcan, Kronos, Baal, Tammuz, Molech, and others. That is true. But he was also the same god, the fire or sun god, universally worshipped in nearly every ancient culture. True again. The goddess Easter was no different. She was one goddess with many names, the goddess of fertility, worshipped in spring when all life was being renewed. So once again, we're just going to summarize, because some people missed this the first time. What's with the eggs? Let's talk about the eggs again. Ishtar, or Semiramis, widow of Nimrod, mother of Tammuz, came to be represented as the bare-breasted pagan fertility goddess of the East. The original pagan festival of Easter was a sex orgy. Here they're not mincing words at all. Sex orgy that celebrated the return of life via the fertility of Ishtar's conception of Tammuz. Worshippers of the Babylonian religion, celebrated the conception of Tammuz on the first Sunday after the full moon that followed the spring equinox. They celebrated it by baking cakes to Ishtar, getting drunk, engaging in sexual orgies, and prostitution in the temple of Ishtar. Women were required to celebrate the conception of Tammuz by lying down in the temple and having sex with whomever entered. The man was required to leave her money, and babies were sacrificed in the honor of these pagan gods, and their blood was consumed by the worshippers. The priest of Ishtar would sacrifice infants, human babies, and take the eggs of Easter or Ishtar as symbols of fertility and dye them in the blood of the sacrificed infants. The impregnated women would give birth around December 25th, 9 months later. The same day, her son, Semiramis, or Tammuz, she had the mother Semiramis. Tammuz was a baby. She had Tammuz, the reincarnate sun god, would be born. So that was his birthday. This is where the practice of coloring Easter eggs came from. Many babies would be born around December 25th from the sex orgies that began on the Feast of Ishtar in the spring, and many of these babies would be sacrificed the following Easter or Ishtar feast. She taught that the moon was a goddess that went through a 28-day cycle and ovulated when full, and that she had come down from the moon in a giant moon egg that fell into the Euphrates River at sunrise at the time of the first full moon after the spring equinox on a Sunday. This was Semiramis. Semiramis became known as Ishtar, which is pronounced Ishtar, referred to as Ashtoreth or Asherah in scripture, and her moon egg became known as an Ishtar egg. One of her titles was the Queen of Heaven, and two of her fertility symbols were and are the rabbit and the egg. Okay, hot cross buns, like they mentioned. Here's where we have all the proof. It was also common for pagans to bake cakes to offer to her, the Queen of Heaven, on the Friday before the Easter festival. This is where we gained the custom of hot cross buns, with the cross symbol indicating the female or the Babylonian symbol for a female, and a circle with a cross or crux beneath it. The cross also indicated the equinox when the Earth's orbit crossed the celestial equator. Worshippers were to meditate upon the sacred mysteries of Baal and Tammuz, and to make the sign of the Tau, a cross, in front of their hearts as they worshipped. What is the group of people who make the sign of the cross before their hearts? Catholics. So that's out of the bag. It's the sign of Tammuz instead. They also ate sacred cakes with the markings of a T or a cross on the top to symbolize the same thing. The children gathered wood, and the fathers kindled a fire, and the women knead their dough to make cakes to the Queen of Heaven and to pour out drink offerings unto other gods. They may provoke me to anger. This is in the Bible, Jeremiah 7:18. It's provoking God to anger. He doesn't want this. He knows they are worshiping in idolatry that goes far into today. Like, he knew it would go through all ages, throughout all history, and we would be dealing with it today. The last one, the ham. Well, we have the ham because Tammuz was supposed to be killed by a wild pig at the age of 40. Some of his blood fell on the stump of an evergreen tree, and the stump grew into a full new tree overnight. This made the evergreen tree sacred by the blood of Tammuz, where we get the word Asherah, which means a sacred wooden post, pole, or pillar that stood near the altar in various Canaanite high places that symbolized the goddess Asherah. She also proclaimed a 40-day period of time of sorrow for each year prior to the anniversary of the death of Tammuz. This was Semiramis, Tammuz's mother. Jeremiah spoke against this practice and pronounced God's judgment against them for these practices. I give the verses there if you want to look it up. Ezekiel also speaks against the celebration of the rites of Ishtar, which were taking place in the temple and the weeping for Tammuz. Again, I give that verse, which refers to the mourning such as crying, mourning process of the death and resurrection symbolism of Easter. Ishtar weeping for the death of her son, Tammuz, which the women were obliged to emulate. This is what becomes known as Lent in Roman Catholic tradition. Ishtar, it's not just Roman Catholic though, it's Lutherans, and I knew several friends when I went to school. I went to public schools mainly, and so we would have many denominations we were dealing with, just like anybody else. And it's almost quite a few Protestant churches that are keeping Lent for some reason and don't know the true origins of this. So sorry, I just thought I'd say that, but it's not Roman Catholic explicitly. It's crept into many different churches. Ishtar also proclaimed that because Tammuz was killed by a pig, that a pig must be eaten on that Sunday. It's Deuteronomy 12, verses 30 through 32. It says, "Take heed to thyself that thou be not snared by following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, How do these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods, for even their sons and their daughters they have burnt in the fire to their gods. What thing soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto, nor diminish from it." Right, so he's saying that we can't look to other gods and how other cultures and other worship has been done to these other idols, because that is not good. God is telling us not to look to them to know how to do anything like that. And so we can't do that and Christianize any of these holidays or things. We should not be keeping traditions. In fact, the way I always put it is the only thing we should be emulating is the culture and traditions that are needed for being a citizen of heaven. And like I said, Christ never told us to keep any of these holidays. He never told us to worship the day he rose on, or worship his mother or his father. Mark 7 verse 9 says, "And he said unto them, Full well ye reject the commandment of God, that ye may keep your own tradition," it says. Mark 7 verse 13, "Making the word of God of none effect through your tradition, which ye have delivered, and many such things ye do." Yeah, so you always make void the word of God and his commandments and all the good things he has for us when you start worshiping other gods, basically. The traditions and customs of man, we don't need any of that. So here is our page for supporting us and donating. We have Cash App. We are under $candidtruthofficial. For Venmo, it is at Mikey Jenny. For Zelle, it is executebrand@gmail.com. For that PayPal donation page, that's directly linked on our website under donate. Any of these will work. We really appreciate everything. Thank you so much, and God bless.